What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Unidentified Flying Podcast. And the following episode is recorded at the Friendly Market in Norman, Oklahoma. And I had a little sit down with Norman City Council member Stephen Tyler Holman. And it's a long one because he goes through the entire Friendly Market saga. I mean, everything leading up to it, any thoughts, feelings in between, anything that happened during the trial, and Stephen also gets into talking about what kind of got him started to be civically minded and politically active and kind of led him to where he is today. Also, there's a little bit of talk about Oklahoma medical marijuana laws and kind of stuff looking forward and some laws that have just taken effect. So if you don't want to miss literally any detail, this is the show for you because Stephen is the star in this one. He is mainly 90% of the episode. So thank you again to him for coming on. I'd love to have him back. So without further ado, this is Stephen Tyler Holman.
Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I want to kind of talk about, I know I want to get you into, talking about this case because we've talked about it on the podcast before.
Sure.
But also kind of just from my perspective as well, just like a normal person that wasn't really, I wasn't looking for this case, when it first popped up. The first time I saw it was, I saw something, I think in Oklahoma or somewhere around here in Oklahoma where it was talking about Norman City Council dealt with drug charges.
Yes.
And that's the headline.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's kind of like,
yeah,
your initial reaction, if you don't know anything about it, whether you care about it or not, is like, oh, well, he's drug dealer.
Yeah.
Is that what you felt like when that happened? I mean, I guess start like, you wanted to obviously get into a business, right? And start running it. And all I knew about was you did your due diligence before that, as far as the law was concerned.
Correct.
So I guess start from there.
Yes. So I didn't really plan to get into this business ahead of growing up or in the last 10 years or anything. It was just actually the culmination of several events over a span of about 6 months. But basically, the Friendly Market was opened on October 4th, 2014, here in Norman on East Constitution Street, close to the university campus. And it was opened by a man named Robert Cox, local businessman. His daughter and I went to high school together. She was one grade below me, but Norman High 2004 for me. She was 2005, so sort of knew each other. And anyway, I've been on the city council in Norman since 2013. I was elected when I was 28 years old. I'm a fourth generation Norman resident.
Were you the youngest?
I'm not the youngest ever that's been elected.
I guess around that time and kind of.
Yeah, when I got elected, I was the youngest on the council for a couple of years, up until about 2 years. Until 2 years ago, I was the youngest person on the council currently. And now we have several younger members, but historically, I would have been the second or tied for second youngest ever that we know of as far as city council goes. So anyway, I'm from Norman, grew up here, went to elementary, middle school, high school here. My dad grew up here and did the same thing. My grandfather worked at Central State or Griffin, what is known as Griffin Hospital here in Norman for 42 years. My great-grandfather owned a small store on Main Street in downtown Norman for 50 years before I was born. He was a shoe and saddle maker. Some of his saddles are actually in the Oklahoma Cowboy Hall of Fame, I guess. And so my family history goes way back in Norman, and got elected in 2013 to the city council. And in 2015, about the spring of 2015, April or so, I got a phone call from a man named Robert Cox, who told me that he owns a small business located within the district that I represent, Ward 7 is what it's called. And he said his store is called the Friendly Market, and he had very thoroughly researched and spoken with legal counsel and done everything you're supposed to do before he opened the business. But, and like I said, he had opened in October 2014. This is around April, May of 2015. And he says, but I've got a visit from the Norman Police Department, and I've noticed that they've just raided a store that sells pipes, glass pipes and things like that, that's on Main Street. And, I'm really concerned about why they are doing that, because, like I said, I thoroughly researched this subject before I opened this store, and if the Norman police are saying that these pipes are just illegal to exist and they're illegal to sell, I really believe they're mistaken about that. So
is that what he found before that raid even happened?
When he opened the store, he did research. He spoke with the former district attorney for Cleveland County. His name is Tim Kirkendall. Tim's daughter and Robert's daughter both were in the same grade and went to high school together and knew each other really well. So that was one of the first people Robert went to for advice when he thought about opening this type of business. And basically, Robert's motivation was, he had been inside of places that would be described as head shops throughout the years, and he wanted to open a store that was kind of try to change the image of that. And from a negative view, like head shop is viewed as pretty generally negatively throughout the community. People think of a head shop as...
Especially the more back in time you go.
Yes, absolutely. Think of it as not being very clean and, in some instances, illegal activity taking place, things like that. And Robert wanted to create a business, a store that was it was clean and professional and friendly, and tried to change the image of that whole thing, and that people would feel more comfortable coming into and
talking about
right,
other people.
Like loves Bob Marley, but we don't have Bob Marley posters all over the walls. Yeah. We love tie dye, but we have some tie dye shirts. There's not just like tie dye everywhere.
We're not throwing it in your face.
Yeah, and so anyway, just like I said, a clean, friendly, professional, more like a boutique type of store. Mm-hmm. And he just wanted to promote health and wellness. Robert is what I would describe as ultra vegan, vegetarian, since the 70s. No meat, no dairy, and
this is not a fad for him.
Exactly, it's not a fad for him. It's real, and he wanted to help promote that better to the community. And he is in his 60s. He's owned his own business for 25 years, another small business in Norman that's completely unrelated to pipes and anything like that. It's a professional service business. So he basically said, I've saved this much and I have this much in savings. I want to start this. And so that's what he did. And so like I said, he did a lot of research. He spoke with people he believed knew what they were talking about. Former district attorney Tim Kirkendall had been the district attorney for 15 years up until 2006, and he did not get reelected, unfortunately, that year.
So was that kind of maybe the understanding that like you wouldn't expect this to happen?
Right. Well, to a certain extent, because there was a history from about 2006 to that point in 2015, 14, when Roberts thought about opening this business, where a string of stores that had opened in Norman did get shut down by the police department.
That's
actually, relatively quickly after they would open.
That's kind of what got me, I think, most interested about this.
Yes.
Is because I used to live right there off Campus Corners on DeBar, which has been renamed.
Yes, Dean's Road.
There was Dazed and Confused right next door to the deli.
Yes.
Way back then.
Yeah.
And it closed down. I think it got raided. I think, this is how the game's played. It's always hearsay.
Yeah.
Oh, I heard they got raided. Sure. Wherever that place was.
Absolutely.
I also heard they were dealing drugs out of there.
Absolutely.
You don't know, nobody actually knows. And then that's what word of mouth.
Absolutely.
That goes hand in hand.
Absolutely. That's, not uncommon. And in many instances, some of those things are true. Mm-hmm. Illegal things were happening at some businesses. Sure. Not any specific in Norman that I know of, but anyway, basically, Tim Kirkendall had been the district attorney from the early 90s up until about 2006. Yeah, 6 or 7 is when he lost re-election to the current district attorney, Greg Mashburn, who was a prominent player in this whole thing.
Sure.
So anyway, Tim Kirkendall, I guess I would describe him as maybe a moderate Democrat if you were to, from unpolitical terms.
Okay.
And so he didn't prosecute everything that the police would bring forward. And so, he used his discretion. He looked at the case, the circumstances, and then would decide if it merited that. And so, I guess all district attorneys have their interpretation and how they decide to prosecute things. And so do the police. But from what I understand, talking to people, 2006 is before I got very politically active at all. But from what I understand, Greg Mashburn ran on a campaign of Tim Kirkendall is not tough on crime. I will be. I'm a strong, conservative Christian man. I'm back in law enforcement. And from what I understand, that part of the deal was I will be more willing to prosecute the cases you bring forward than Tim Kirkendall. So if the law enforcement community supports me,
support me even more.
Support me, and we will clean up this town. We'll clean up this county, and he's sent here by higher forces to clean up, is the way I would describe Greg Mashburn. And so anyway, around that time, anytime a store would open, or ones that were open at the time, just started being closed under, sometimes mysterious circumstances, or like people would say, what happened there?
I was actually more surprised when I heard a place opened.
Yeah,
I was like, wow,
exactly.
There is one?
And it doesn't make much sense because Norman is the third largest city in the state of Oklahoma. We are widely considered to be the most liberal or progressive politically community in the state of Oklahoma.
It's right next to Oklahoma City.
Yes, we're right next to Oklahoma City. We're in the metropolitan area.
You could go up there and buy the exact same things. That's what blew my mind. And I never could really. It's like, what's the difference? Yeah.
And our city council, there's 9 of us, including the mayor. And this isn't the case at the time, but right now, for example, there's 9 of us, and there are 0 Republicans on the council.
Okay.
I mean, Norman is a pretty, I would say, liberal or progressive comparative to the rest of Oklahoma community, with a large university, a very educated overall population. And so why, alternative or pipe store or head shops or whatever were being run out of this town did not make sense to anybody. There are a lot of people, just like it caught your attention.
Yeah.
A lot of people thought, well, why? There's pipe stores all over the state. They're all over OKC and Tulsa, and they're all over small towns across Oklahoma, which is something I found out when researching the subject once, we were facing these charges, and we started researching, okay, so what is the law in Oklahoma? And we found out that we did an inventory, basically. We tried to find every pipe store, every store in the whole state that sold glass pipes and what towns they were in. And you would be amazed at the small, what you would think of as very conservative, Bibles, church towns. You would think there's no way there'd be a pipe store in that town. There was one, for example, and I don't know the exact political persuasion of the town of Okmulgee, south, east of Tulsa a little bit. But right off the highway there in Okmulgee, there is a drive-through pipe store that's in an old Long John Silver store. And 2 blocks over is the Okmulgee police station. So there's no way the police there don't know about it.
Yeah.
It's drive-through.
Yeah.
You can buy a pipe and drive-through. Very convenient. So, and that will be relevant in a moment when I get to what the police in Norman's view about it was. And so basically these stores exist all over the state of Oklahoma, but not in Norman, not the third largest and most liberal city in the state.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Not just a little bit, like at all.
At all. Yeah, none. And, lots of old hippies live in Norman, and again, a lot of educated professors and just we have our average age in Norman based on the last census, I think it was 29 or 30, so it's a young, progressive community. And so it didn't make sense. So why that is also relevant is why Robert Cox contacted me was he said, I have a store located in your district. I did a lot of research about this. I'm confident the Norman police are wrong. Or is there maybe some sort of obscure, old city of Norman ordinance that says pipe stores or whatnot can't be here, or that pipes are paraphernalia, and maybe it wasn't being enforced under a previous DA, and maybe the police just now are enforcing it. that could be the case because every city has some weird old
That's kind of what I thought. I was like, maybe there is.
Yeah.
Maybe there's some weird state law.
Well, and in a similar fashion, or, in the 80s, in the 70s and 80s, from what I understand, there were a lot more, there were a number of adult entertainment clubs in Norman.
Okay.
And in the 80s, there was local legislation put in place that, from a zoning standpoint, made it pretty much illegal to have one. So that's why there is only one that still exists. People will think of, or might know of Sugars on Campus Corner. So, that's the only one that is in Norman. And so some thought maybe there's a similar ordinance that says, about pipes. And none of them were grandfathered in. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. So Robert asked me from a city council standpoint if I could look into, if I could have our city legal staff look into that and, give a definitive answer. And if I could help maybe arrange a meeting with him and the chief of police and other city representatives, to really get to the bottom of what the case was here. So, so I did that. I met with the city legal staff. They gave me they did some research, got back to me, and showed that there's not any City of Norman ordinance that says stores can't sell pipes or that pipes are drug paraphernalia, that they're illegal just by existing.
Yeah.
Our city ordinance said drug paraphernalia is this if these circumstances, just like the state law says. Is there illegal substances in the pipe? Is there a bag of illegal substances next to the pipe?
Sure.
Is the store promoting, and this was a real important piece of the law, is the store promoting the use of it? Is there intent that these pipes be used illegally? And so in the absence of actual illegal substances, the argument is the store is promoting the illegal use. Their intent is really, they can call it a water pipe, they can call it whatever they want to call it.
Pipe,
right, but their real intent is for these pipes to be used for marijuana. And we know that because there's no other use for these pipes. In our training and experience, and the lead detective in the case, Detective Rick Newell, at the time a 28-year, I believe, 28-year veteran of the Norman Police Department. Mm-hmm. He had been a detective for 20 of those years, undercover narcotics, all that stuff, like the whole deal. And so the whole theme was in our training and experience. In my 28 years of training and experience, I've only ever seen those type of pipes used for the consumption of marijuana, which is illegal.
So we're supposed to just see it just from their eyes.
So their standpoint was glass pipes are absolutely illegal no matter what to exist because we know what they're going to be used for. There's no other purpose.
Okay.
And so basically your intent could not be anything else. You're selling them, whatever you're selling them for, there's nothing you could be selling them for other than them for to be used for legal. So that's the case that they made. That's the interpretation of the law that the police department in Norman took. And that is the interpretation that the district attorney in Cleveland County was willing to back up and pursue as well. And so that was different than we found out as this went on. We found out, that was different than police departments and DAs were interpreting it across the rest of the state. And that's why there were pipe stores everywhere else. And just like the previous district attorney, Tim Kirkendall, his view was if the store had illegal substances, if they were selling synthetic marijuana, if they were clearly promoting the use of these pipes for the consumption of marijuana, if they had a big pot leaf poster on the wall behind their showcase,
that's not going to help.
If they had High Times magazines on the rack, those would be the term that was said over and over again in the trials, the totality of the circumstances. If the totality of the circumstances points to the fact to this store promoting that use, so if you've got High Times magazines, you've got a pot leaf poster over there, you've got Bob Marley's picture on that T-shirt smoking a joint, then
we know where this is headed.
Those things all together mean that. And so that's how you could be in violation of the law, even if there aren't actual illegal substances. And that's why the language part of before medical marijuana and all this that we have now, but before, why you couldn't say bong, why you had to be careful about the way you describe things, is because bong would mean it would make it reasonable to assume that your intent was to use that pipe for marijuana. So if you as a customer come to the store and say, I'm looking for a bong, then you've just made it to where I should, by the law's eyes, reasonably assume, based on that description, that you're going to use it for marijuana. And that is what the police would do when they would come in undercover and make buys, is they would try to get employees of a store to say marijuana or talk about marijuana, or the undercover officer would use a term like bong or joint or whatever, and if that employee did not correct them, then they got them. And that's how a lot of those stores actually did get shut down.
Did they do that to you?
They did. They did do that. They, unfortunately for them, they actually did not get us they got us on audio several times. They came in and bought things undercover. Thankfully, we did not make any mistakes when it came to correction or allowing words to be said, things like that. They weren't able to get us. We had to listen to all the audio recordings. I think they came in, 4 different times, 4 different undercover officers over a span of about a month or so had come in. And so that's what they would do, though. And like I said, over a span of time, sometimes over a span of months, they would go into a store, even become regular customers. Mm-hmm. And then, build up a friendship with the clerk and, once upon. Yeah. And then that's how they would get them. And in some cases, again, there was illegal activity, as in there was illegal substances being sold out the back door, things like that. Or the stores had the High Times magazine with the posters and pot leaves all over everything, and clearly breaking the intent part, I would say. So, but anyway, the Norman police say none of that matters, and none of intent, none of it matters. It's just illegal to exist. So, none of these circumstances need to apply. The state law on what paraphernalia is actually 12 steps, and it includes: is there substances in the pipe? Is there substances in proximity to it? The intent of, is there posters, all that stuff. Yeah. All that combined is used to determine whether it's paraphernalia or not. So the idea that it's just illegal no matter what, that kind of flies in the face of, well, the state law says there's these things you have to apply to it first. If it was just illegal no matter what, the state law would say, all glass pipes are illegal in the state of Oklahoma. Period. There's nothing to apply to it. Yeah, it is. We just don't want it. If you see it, it's illegal. Yeah. So, and that came about in the trials. That played out in the courtroom as being true. But Robert Cox, the owner, basically he stopped. I was able to arrange meetings with him, with the chief of police, and like I said, there was no city of Norman ordinance that said we couldn't do it. I went to this meeting with him, with the chief of police, a couple detectives that were in the narcotics division, a city attorney, and it was Robert and his daughter, and myself, and we went around the table for about an hour and a half or so, and it was pretty much a stalemate. The police department said, this is what we believe. We believe that it's illegal.
Now, is this after they raided you?
No, it's not.
This is before.
Yeah, this is in May of 2015. Okay. This is before I worked here and anything like that. This is right after the store had been open since October, so this is May. A detective had basically what had happened was the police raided a popular pipe store on Main Street, right here in downtown Norman. And the significance of that was this place was a glass blowing gallery.
Yeah, I actually went into one on the art walk.
It's called McLeod's. Yeah. They made some really high-end pieces. Some of them were a couple $1,000s. And during Art Walk, Second Friday Art Walk, it was a huge, popular place. People went in there. Kids loved seeing it. They did it right in front of you. It was amazing. It was great having a place like that on Main Street, too. And so one day, though, the police raided that store. Detective Newell raided the store. They took all of his stuff. Unfortunately for him, from what I understand, they did search his car that was parked in the back of the place, which is arguably, he argued, an illegal search because it wasn't inside. The warrant was for inside. Sure, yeah. So I believe in his defense, he argued that they searched my car illegal, but he did have a pipe in his car that had residue
Sure.
in it, so they got him for that. And so it made his case a little bit different than what our case ended up being, because there was no illegal substances. But anyway, Robert heard about this happening. So Robert, like I said, Robert has been a business owner for 25 years. He's in his 60s. He's got grandkids. He's a professional businessman. As soon as he hears about this, he calls the police department. Robert calls the police department, says, I need to speak to this detective, Rick Newell. I own a business here in Norman, and I need to speak to him about this pipe store issue. So if he can please call me back at this number. So Robert reaches out to say, hey, I sell these items. What's going on?
Yeah.
So Detective Newell calls him back. Detective Newell, apparently, we find out later, does go into the store undercover and buy some stuff before Robert had made contact. So Detective Newell did already know about Friendly Market. But he agrees to meet with Robert for coffee. They meet. Detective Newell says, as far as I'm concerned, it's all illegal. And you cannot keep selling them. And they go back and forth, and he says, no, it's illegal. You've got to stop. And I'll let you take them off the shelves. So if you take them off the shelves, and, that's it. You don't have to close your business. You just can't sell that stuff anymore. And if you do that, you won't hear from me, basically. And so, Robert, went back and forth. He's like, well, can we have like a fire sale and just get rid of all of it? He said, no. You have to take it off the shelves. You could put it in storage. You could do whatever, but no, you can't sell any of it.
Sure.
You just have to get rid of it. And so, Robert is just like, the business, that's the number one selling item in the business. It's a new business in its first 6 months, so you're telling me I got to take away my best-selling thing when I'm just a brand new business. It's about to be summertime in Norman.
Yeah.
School's out,
yep.
At OU. And
things slow down.
Yeah, things slow down. So, that's what Robert got out of that meeting. That's when he called me and got me involved, and that's when I arranged the meeting with the chief of police and got the clarification from legal staff about no city law says you can't do that. And so, like I said, in that meeting, the police stalemate. They just said, no, we're not budging. We're the police, and this is what we believe. The law is. That's what it is. The police. We're the police, and the law is what we say it is.
Yeah.
That's basically it. So what are you going to do? And as a city council member, I only have so much power. I don't have the authority to order the police to do anything. The city of Norman.
You're not their head supervisor.
No, the city of Norman is what is called a council manager form of government. Mm-hmm. We have an elected 8-member city council and an elected mayor who is the 9th or 1st member of the city council, however you want to look at it. And the mayor is just the chair of our meetings and has to be elected by the whole city. But we actually have what is called a city manager that actually runs the city and who is the chief executive. He's in charge of all the employee matters, all the departments, all the policy in regard to that. The city council, we're the legislative body, and the city manager's job is, to implement the policy that we pass and things like that. But he is in charge of all interdepartmental policies and things like that. So the police don't answer to me directly. I do their budget. I approve their budget every year. And so I'm involved in that sense, but I can't just march down to the police department and say, well, you guys are wrong about that, and you're just going to look the other way.
Yeah.
Maybe in some places, in old time.
Maybe.
But not in Norman. And so I don't have the authority to really push it any further than what we can go at that point. I've arranged meetings. I got clarification. But outside of Robert hiring attorneys and, taking legal action, there's nothing really else I could do at that point. Maybe long-term I could work on policy that defines city law as not paraphernalia for privacy.
Yeah.
But that would be a several months to even possibly a year. And medical marijuana wasn't even on the horizon at that point. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure the council as a whole at that time would have cared to even take on that issue. So anyway, I told them I don't think, I wish I could do more. I'm sorry.
Is what it is.
Yeah, a few months went by that summer. Didn't really hear much. He called me later in July, and just checking up, seeing if I'd heard anything. And I hadn't. And he said, "Yeah, it was getting pretty bad. They'd had, 1 customer days, because they had tapestries and clothing and some furniture and stuff like that, but, not stuff people generally buy every day.
Yeah.
And in bulk or whatever. And so he said, we even had one day where it was a negative. Somebody had a return, and we had no buying customers that day. So it's getting really bad, desperate. So, I said, I'll keep my eyes out for anything I see, and I'll let you know. So I am pretty active on social media. I have been for a long time. It's a big part of how I got elected to city council, was being very well known on Facebook. And,
I think that's probably how I saw you just running, getting elected, I think.
When I got elected, it was against an incumbent and opponent who was much older than I was, and she had lots of money, but she was not at all active on social media, and her amount of money could not buy the fact that people knew what I had been talking about for years, and there were people that reached out to me that didn't even know me that said, Stephen, I really am glad you're running. I really support you. I don't know you in person. We've never met, but I've followed the things you post about for years, and I have no doubt that I can trust you up there, and based on the issues and things you talk about, I think you would be great there. So I didn't have to spend money and go door to door and talk to a lot of those folks. And even though a lot of them didn't live in my district, they might have friends and family do, or the fact they just share my thing, or just overall support.
Mm-hmm.
The first time I ran, I actually lost in a runoff by 21 votes. 2011, I was 26 years old, and ran 2 years later and won by 28 votes over the incumbent who had defeated me 2 years prior.
Because it's not a high total.
No. Local elections are always low turnout, and even though we're the third largest city in Oklahoma, with about 125,000 people, each district has about 15,000 or so, give or take. City council elections can also often be decided by very few votes. Less than 1,000 total votes is not uncommon in most city council districts. And in my case, when I first got elected in 2013, when I had run the second time, I won 220 votes to 192 over my opponent. So
just a barn burner.
Yeah. And my district, I would admit my district, Ward 7, is the lowest voting turnout district in Norman.
Sure.
It's where most of the university campus is located. I have a lot of folks who are registered to vote, but a lot of students don't know that they can vote in local elections. And I've made some headway in changing that over the years. I've steadily seen the vote total. I've been reelected 4 times, or I've been elected 4 times now, most recently in February. And over the times I've had to run, I've seen that vote total go up every time, which it was one of my goals. But overall, most students on campus, a lot of them will register to vote here in Norman at the dorms or a fraternity or sorority house or whatnot, or an apartment complex. But overwhelmingly, they don't know about city council or elections or anything like that. So a lot of them are surprised when I go speak to student groups, and they're like, "Oh, I had no idea." Or they're just like, "Oh, I'm not from here, and I didn't know I could vote and those type of stuff." And I say, "Well, if you're going to live in Norman for 4 years or 5 or 6 or whatever, then you should definitely vote here, because we're making policy that impacts you now and also the future students that are going to be here. So the things that you think right now that should be different or that we should do better, you can help us make policy that so students in the future, won't have to." And so anyway, low turnout, all that stuff, and social media was a big way for me to get where I got on that. And so I was reading the news feed one day, and it was about early August 2015, and it maybe 2 weeks since I talked to Robert on the phone about, when he told me about sales being way down. And I saw this story on the news feed about a federal judge in Oklahoma City in regard to the chain of stores called Ziggy's. We have one in Norman now, but they're really well known in Oklahoma City.
Sure.
I think the first one opened in 1981 up on 36th and Penn. And anyway, Ziggy's was really well known, not only for being around a long time, but because the previous owner had gotten in some very serious trouble legally, criminally. I think he's in prison, maybe even still. I'm not sure about that, but the last I had heard about it. But anyway, they had raided warehouses, several stores, his personal home, all this type of stuff. I mean, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars worth of inventory and product. So it was a really big deal. Not a good reputation for that brand name, right?
Yeah.
And so when this happens, a different guy decides to buy the business. I guess he owned a store in one of he owned a different business completely, but it was in one of the same strip malls as a Ziggy's store. So when he saw all this happen, he said, well, maybe I'll buy that business and see if I can clean it up. And maybe he thought, marijuana would be legal sometime soon, and he wanted to get, I don't know exactly his motivation, but business opportunity. It's an existing brand that's been around.
Of course.
There are 12 locations. Anyway, he bought them, and I think he narrowed it down to 6 stores, and he was kind of cleaning it up a little bit, from what I understand. And I guess the police or some law enforcement agency started harassing the property owners of some of the strip malls or commercial properties where his stores were, threatening things like, we're going to, use civil asset forfeiture, and we'll take your property if you continue renting out space to these criminal, what we believe are criminal businesses. They're selling criminal stuff. Look at what the owner just went, he's in jail for doing that stuff.
Yeah.
And so, I think, and what Chelsea, the owner of Ziggy's, he had filed a lawsuit, from what I understand, he was seeking a restraining order, maybe something like that, against the police, basically saying whatever the previous owner did is not relevant. It's not related to me. It's not my problem, and you have no legal right to harass, threaten the property owners of these commercial spaces and force them to kick me out. You just can't do that. And a federal judge, Judge Heaton, agreed with him, apparently. And I saw this headline about judge issues order, I think, for Ziggy's, in favor of Ziggy's, something like that. So I sent it to Robert, and I said, hey, check this out. This federal judge thinks the police need to leave Ziggy's alone because of this new owner, and so on and on. So you might check into that, might contact that guy and see who his attorneys are or whatever, and see if you can get a hold of that ruling and read it. And then right after that same week, actually, I think, I read about this other story on Facebook. Adam McAllister. It was about this store called the Funky Monkey. It's a store in McAllister, right as you're going into McAllister on Highway 9. They do tattoos and piercings, and they have adult toys and pipes, and, incense and tapestries, all that stuff. And they've been there for a really long time, from what I understand. And the police there had raided the store under the suspicion that they were selling K2 or synthetic marijuana, if I remember correctly, and did not actually find any, from what I understand, but did take all their pipes, took all the money in the store, and also went to the bank in a move, a pretty extreme move that didn't even happen in our case, but they went to the bank and froze the bank accounts of not only the 2 owners, but the owners are husband and wife, the wife's mother's bank account, because the mother was actually the founder, or maybe she had owned the company, the business for a long time. The husband and wife had just bought it from her a few months prior, probably 6 months prior.
They thought she had bankrolled it.
So they went and froze $50,000, something like that. It was a lot of money. And the story was about how basically without any charges being filed, without any court proceedings, that they had gotten all their stuff back and all their money back. And it was like the picture was these 2 attorneys and the business owners, I think they were in it, and this big conference table at the attorney's office. And they had all these boxes on it and pipes and everything. It was all their stuff, and it was like, Funky Monkey back open or something. Mm-hmm. And so what had happened is the police there, the DA there, had threatened to, if we didn't find what we were looking for, but we're going to keep this stuff though. Mm-hmm. And if you contest it, we're going to file criminal charges against you for possession of drug paraphernalia, illegal funds, all this stuff. So just let it go, and we'll let you go.
Okay.
But we're taking your money.
Yeah.
We're taking all your property.
Thanks.
So those business owners, I don't know how they knew Brecken and Blake, Wagner and Lynch law firm, right there in downtown McAllister. But they got with them. The attorneys called the bluff for the police and said, well, these aren't drug paraphernalia, and you're not just going to take their property and their money. And if you want to go to trial, then in Brecken's exact terms, fuck it, let's go to trial.
Yeah.
That's exactly.
I mean, seriously, that seems to especially with your case here, it's like no one was ever willing to just call their bluff on it.
Yeah, and that can give you a little glimpse into why they ended up being our attorneys later on in our trial. But I read about this case, sent that to Robert, and I said, hey, Robert, check this out. This case out of McAllister. So if glass pipes are just illegal to exist, as the Norman police are proclaiming, then I don't know how, because this store just got all their stuff back, and they didn't even have to there were no criminal charges filed, they didn't go to court.
Yeah.
And the police didn't find illegal substances, and so they had to give them back their property. And so, because it's not illegal to exist as the Norman Police Department.
Did they still keep their money, the civil asset?
No, they got, from what I understand, almost all of it back.
Okay.
I don't know exactly the explanation for why they didn't get all of it back, but I think they got 99% of it back.
Sure.
There was some amount they didn't. This is Pittsburgh County, southeast Oklahoma. I don't know what goes on there.
Yeah.
Anyway, told Robert about that case. He contacted the Wagner and Lynch guys. Brecken, I guess, I don't know if he's necessarily the senior partner, but his name is first, Wagner, Brecken Wagner. Mm-hmm. He came up to Norman, came to the store, did a public presentation that anybody could come to in what was the pipe room at the time. At the original store, where the pipes and everything were kept were in a separate room. The owner of the building had insisted on it when Robert moved the business into it, that they be in a separate room and it made sense because Robert wanted to also make sure anybody that went in there was over 18. Anybody that could legally purchase tobacco, just figured you got to be 18 and show your ID to come in this room.
Because not people just wandering in and
and to allow anybody, including kids, parents of their kids, to come in the store because it sold furniture and clothing and jewelry and things like that. So, people would come in, look around at the artwork, and, your kids could come in. There was a pizza place next door and a family video store on the other side next door. So people would sometimes be waiting around, getting their food. Anyway, but pipes and everything in a separate room. So anybody could still come in. You just got to be 18 to go in this room. And Brecken held his little presentation in there, and we filmed it and everything. And Brecken said, "This is what the law is. This is why these are not illegal to exist. I don't care what the Norman Police Department says. These are not illegal to exist, and this is why. And this is legal. Here's an example of what would not be legal. There are some stipulations about the size and diameter of pipes, and basically the state law does aim to prohibit specifically pipes that would be used for meth." Okay. Crack pipes.
That's all I could ever find.
Yes.
Even before all this happened, was I know there was some kind of
it talks about,
has to be certain diameter, length, and inches. And
it talks about things like that. Yeah. And that was and we, went as far as we spoke to the state rep Mike Shelton. He's not in the legislature anymore, but he's who primarily authored the current paraphernalia laws several years ago. And he was very clear that his intent was absolutely these specific types of pipes and things that he would see in gas stations around the city, especially in the northeast side of the city where he represented OKC, northeast side. And so that was the intent. We spoke with several other legislators and former legislators who confirmed that exact same thing. Our intent was never that all pipes are illegal in the state of Oklahoma. That is not correct. Specifically about these,
certain types.
Yes. And so anyway, we didn't sell any of those types of pipes. We're not accused of selling those types of pipes. Anyway, so based on that, Robert felt very confident that he could put all those things back on the shelves, and it was either that or close the business. So based on these attorneys' advice, these 2 cases in Oklahoma City and McAllister, Robert put all the product he had back on the shelves, and business picked up, immediately, because there were no other pipe stores in Norman.
Yeah.
And so, and a few weeks later, a month or so, is when I started working here. And it was because throughout that summer, I'd actually been looking for a more full-time, regular day job. Mm-hmm. City council only pays $100 a month, and that's by statute. Can only be changed by a vote of the people. It's been that way since 1981. And there's never, I guess, really been a good time to ask this public for a raise.
$200?
Yeah, there's just so many other things. The city never has enough money for a lot of really important issues.
Sure.
So the idea of paying city council more has never really been big on the priority list. I think it has grown more traction over the years because a lot of people have thought it does take a lot of work and commitment, and if it doesn't pay anything, it could limit who can do it.
Sure.
If somebody doesn't have enough money, or enough time to spare like that, they can't afford to be on city council. I'm not married and I don't have children, and I have a pretty low, expense lifestyle for the most part. So I've been able to do it and get by. And at the time, I also, like I mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned it on the record here, but I work the door at a local music venue here in Norman called The Deli on Campus Corner. I've been around for 40, 50 years now. Live music 7 nights a week. But as a side gig, I've worked the door there for about 9 years, and it's a pretty good deal. You get to talk to people that, are out at nighttime, and a lot of people, especially since I've been on city council, appreciate that I still do it. They're like, I don't know if any other elected officials, work at a bar at night and, sweep cigarette butts off the sidewalk at 2 a.m. But
or even just another job sometimes.
Yeah.
Just that alone, much less
yeah.
at the deli.
And I like that it lets me, stay in contact with some, folks that you might not see come to City Hall or, and so, but there's still issues that, go on. And some people just will see me at the door and be like, hey, that thing. And so I like doing that. But anyway, so I did that, and I had worked for a small business in Norman. It was a space exploration company actually called Astronomics. Primarily online retail, but space exploration equipment, telescopes primarily, and equipment to go along with that. So a lot of people that do, build observation stuff in their backyard or whatever, are real into it, spend thousands of dollars. Yeah. And I did that for a couple of years. It was a company based out of Norman. I did just retail sales, basically answer calls and answer questions. And,
no rockets involved or anything.
Yeah, I didn't have to call anybody, but people called me, and I had to, So I did that, and did that for a couple of years, and I had, there was changes there, and it was not extremely flexible with my schedule and city council and some other things. So I had left that job, and at the time, my girlfriend and I had lived together, and she had a pretty good job, and city council and the deli, we were fine. So it was no urgent thing for me to go get a full-time gig, but it had been a few months, and I had turned down a couple jobs at OU. They were unwilling to be flexible with city council completely. And I had applied for a security job at the Stevenson Cancer Research Center at OU here in Norman, which is actually, the security is run by the OUPD. And apparently the OUPD has a policy that male officers cannot have long hair and can only have a mustache. And so for those of you that do not know what it looked like, I've had long hair for about 15 years of my life so far. That wasn't almost since I was in high school. And I have a mustache and a goatee. And I feel like I would look ridiculous with just the mustache. So, so I was basically like, so OUPD is sort of sexist here. Males can't have long hair. That's weird. And I can only have like a 70s porn mustache. That's okay. So
that's it.
And you're not going to be flexible with my city council schedule. So, okay, well, I'm going to have to decline that one. Thank you. And as a city council member, there's a lot of business connections I could reach out to in that instance. But, I'm sure, like I know, some of the founders of Ideal Homes or some big development companies in town. If I'd have reached out and said, hey, I really need some kind of, job during the, 8 to 5 or whatever that's flexible city council, secretary, I don't know, something. I'm sure that could have got one, but I don't think it would look very good for a city councilman to go to work for the largest home builder in town.
Sure, yeah.
So conflict of interest. Basically, I found if you had any ethics, it could be difficult to find a job while you're a current elected official, because a lot of small businesses would be concerned about the impact to their business that you, being an elected official, could have. Could be positive if people like you, but if you vote for something bad just one time, and it's happened to council members before who are small business owners themselves, where they vote for something that customers of theirs didn't like, and they lose business. So a small business hiring me could be risky, and if I have ethics, going to work for a bigger company in town could be a problem too.
Yeah, stigma.
So I was taking my time though, and I had mentioned it to Robert. This is what I do. City council. This is my schedule, and I don't really have a full-time job right now. So anyway, after he started selling pipes again and all that stuff, he called me a couple weeks ago and said, Stephen, I really appreciate all your help. Arranging those meetings and finding those articles for me. It's business has really picked back up, and I really appreciate that. I know you had mentioned a couple times before over the summer, that you were looking for a full-time job and you needed something flexible. And, I have this other business that I run, and, I really just can't be down at the Friendly Market and run that all the time. And I guess the general manager who had started the store had left a few months before, and they were just kind of cobbling together, some management. And with sales way down and no pipes, they didn't really have much to manage, I guess. So he just said, we need somebody down that can be down there full time during the day. He said, I got this guy named Cody. He works here at my business here during the day, but in the afternoons he comes down from the market and he can close up and everything. He does the ordering, and he's pretty knowledgeable about stuff. And they're like, and we got Max too. Max has been here for a few months, and he's real familiar with the stuff. And so you guys will be you guys, and if you're interested, I'd like to have you come on and be the general manager of the store, and we'll be completely flexible with your schedule. You can make the schedule if you want, and I'll pay you this much. And the amount he told me was more than I had made at any job. I had mostly worked at, other than that, Astronomics, which I think paid me around $9 an hour. I think, which was good, which was the best I'd made at that point. Yeah. But before that, I'd worked in the kitchen at Hideaway Pizza. I had been a cashier and a host at Hideaway Pizza for 6 years. I'd worked in various restaurants and a couple of retail things. I'd spent 2 seasons working for the OU football team on the staff there when I went to OU for a year. But I spent 2 seasons on the team as a video camera guy. I filmed every single practice and every single game for 2 years. I had to travel with the team and all that stuff. I played football growing up in high school and everything, and ran track. So, and I was in media a lot. Norman Public Schools has a really amazing media program. So they have the school channel where you learn production and editing and how to put on a show and how to operate equipment. So I landed a job with the football team filming because I knew how to do that stuff. So anyway, I had done jobs like that, and back then I think that job paid $5.15 an hour. It was pathetic. I got to
different times
travel around, and I got like free shoes and gear and stuff.
Sure.
But anyway, so this offer was pretty nice. Offer to work for a small family-owned business in the district I represent that is willing to be flexible with city council and it's going to pay me well, and I said, okay.
Does it get any better?
Yeah, I said, I'm going to have to meet with the city attorney office and talk to them about whether there's a conflict of interest or get their opinion about this legal issue that has been apparent, and because it's like if the Norman Police Department thinks this is illegal, is it a conflict of interest? From the city attorney standpoint, should I? It's so. I met with the city attorney for lunch one day. We talked about it. I shared with him those articles too about what in Oklahoma City and McAllister, and went over all that. I told him about the job offer, and I said they are selling pipes. They put those back on the shelves based on these cases, based on this legal advice from this law firm out of McAllister. based on the opinion of Tim Kirkendall, the former DA, all that stuff. And it was about an hour and a half long lunch meeting. And at the end, I said, so, what do you think about all this? Do you think, should I take this job? Would you advise that I not? Based on conflict of interest? And his exact words, very simply, I don't see a problem with it. Shook my hand. He paid for lunch, and we left. And he walked back to City Hall. I got in my car.
It's fairly explicit.
Yeah, I got in the car. I called my girlfriend first. I said, hey, I'm the city attorney. Says it's fine. So I think I'm going to accept that job. I'm going to call Robert back. So I get off the phone with her. I call Robert and I say, hey, Robert, great news. City attorney says it's fine. He doesn't see a problem with it at all. And so, I can start whenever you want. And so I started on September 8th, 2015. Started, putting my touch on the store, moving some stuff around. I've always had a pretty good eye for arranging furniture, and my best subject in school was geometry, actually. So pretty good with shapes and making things fit inside of spaces pretty well. It's very good at Tetris. So, and so started doing that stuff, and then a place like that, people would come, just knowing that I post on Facebook, hey, everybody, I'm proud and excited to accept the job as here at a business, here in the district I represent, here at the Friendly Market. So come see me anytime. I'll be here. Come see the store. You can talk to me about city issues, whatever. So pretty exciting. Very publicly open about what I was doing, where I was working, what we were selling there.
It wasn't down some alleyway.
No. Because I was so active on social media, one of the things I started doing was posting about stuff on Facebook. I would post pictures of the pipes. I'd post pictures of papers, whatever I could do to promote the store, furniture, whatever we had. And, that was working. We were starting to grow pretty rapidly. A couple months went by. In early November, Robert sent me and Cody and my girlfriend actually paid for all three of us to go to Colorado, to Denver, to an industry trade show called Champs. It's, I think, the biggest trade show in the industry. And they do it in Las Vegas a couple times a year. They do it in Denver. They do it in a couple of other places. And I had never been to Colorado before. It was the only state that touches Oklahoma that I'd never been to.
Oh, wow.
And so I was like, awesome. We stayed in downtown Denver. The convention center was across the street. 600 plus vendors of all sorts of pipes, everything you could think of that would be in a store. And so it was pretty amazing. Had a great time. We were there for 3 days. Got to go to Boulder, got to drive around, went to see Red Rocks. There wasn't a concert, but just drove and walked around and just explored a little bit. It was great. Came back. Things are going great at the store. We got some great ideas. I think the day after we got back, I was working, and a guy came in the store, and I recognized his face. And after a few minutes, I recognized he's an armed police officer. And he came to buy some pipes and stuff. He asked a few questions. He was I didn't know he was undercover. He was undercover. But I thought, we've been pretty open about this. He could just be coming in here off. This is private. You can come in here if he wants. He's over 21. I checked his ID. Yeah. It was a real ID because when the police come in undercover, they use a real fake ID. If that makes sense.
Sure, yeah. It's legitimate.
Under a scanner, it would show up as that name under that everything. It's from the state. They get it. So, and I'm telling them we have some information about the state law and about those cases and why we sell pipes. And he asked about that, and I'm talking to him about it. I'm like, so this went on, and he stopped selling them, and these attorneys and these cases, and that's why we sell them in here. And they're in this room because we want to make sure that anybody comes in here is over 18 and is of legal age to smoke tobacco or any other smokable herbs. And we sell a lot of other things. We want people to be able to come in, even if they're anyway. And
it's really out there when you're talking to this guy.
Yeah. And I didn't know. It didn't hit me exactly when I was talking to him that he was a police officer. I just knew that I recognized him really well, and I was starting to think, yeah, I'm pretty sure, because I go to every police academy graduation. There's sometimes 2 a year, but usually 1 a year, and I go every time, and I introduce myself to every single cadet that graduates, and I give them my city council card. And so I know you do that for 6-7 years. And
start remembering.
By that time, you really might know everybody in the police department.
Yeah.
There's 150 patrol officers. 7 years, you might recognize a whole lot of them. So he bought some stuff. He got in his car and left. I watched what car he got into and left. I went to the back, got on Facebook, went to the Norman PD Facebook page, and just started scrolling through their pictures. And sure enough, I come across his picture of him getting his badge pinned on at his academy graduation a few years before. He didn't have a beard and mustache, and he wasn't wearing a baseball cap, obviously, in that picture. But his face was very prominent, very prominent cheekbones and, kind of chiseled face, and so definitely recognizable. And so I printed off that picture. I posted it in the office. And I told everybody that came in, I said, hey, everyone, other stores have been shut down in the past in Norman. Norman has a controversial history of stores like this being shut down. Robert stopped selling pipes for a while because of this. So I just want you to know this person who came in, he is a police officer. He may not have been undercover. He may have just been coming in here as a customer, and he is absolutely welcome to do so because we're not doing anything illegal. But just be aware. Always be aware of what you say in your surroundings and what customers say and do, and just always be careful. Remember the advice that Brecken Wagner told us back then. And if you weren't here, this is what he said. Yeah. And so that became a big issue later on, the fact that I printed off a picture of an undercover police officer and posted it on a wall for people to see.
Not just
they made a
chap their
they
ass,
made they were like, I put his life in danger.
Because you're working with the syndicate.
If anybody would have seen that he's worked undercover, they might the real big drug kingpin that he's been undercover before. If they recognized him, I could have put his life in danger, type of stuff. And I was like, well,
couldn't they have just done
you could have not
did?
Put his picture on Facebook too.
Yeah,
if he's an undercover narcotics officer, maybe his picture should have been scrubbed off your Facebook page from 2012.
Because you were able to just do some.
Yeah, I was able to look for about 20 minutes and found it. So anyway, that came up later as a thing. But anyway, it was December 1st. 2015, I had opened the store. We were open for about an hour. And I was in the back. At that time, we weren't busy enough to need 2 people right away. Usually I'd work alone for about the first 3 hours, and then Max would come in, and a few hours later Cody would come in, and those 2 would close, or what, And we had a couple other employees too, Crystal and Joseph, who would work sometimes. Those 2 were not charged, interestingly enough. I'll get to that. But not everybody that worked there was charged with anything, just selectively. But I was working alone. I heard the bell on the door ring, and I got up from the desk in the back. As I started to walk up to the front, I heard somebody say, "Hello, Norman Police. We have a warrant to search the premises. Anybody back here, just come on out." And so I was coming out anyway, and I was like, is there anybody else? No guns drawn, nothing like that. No uniformed officers, no marked patrol cars in the parking lot, nothing. Just a white van parked out front, plain clothes officers with a badge around their neck, like on a lanyard type of thing. Very casual, like I said. Several of them had their shirts untucked, so their guns weren't even visible. It was just not like what you would see on TV or like with a radio. Is this how they usually do? Like for instance, the no, other stores had been different. Other stores, there were patrol cars and
people in
uniformed officers carrying all that type of stuff. So whether it was because they knew I was there, I don't know. Later on, they proclaimed they had no idea who I was. That when they had been surveillancing the store, they had no idea who I was. That they didn't know I was a city councilman. They just knew I worked there. And because we found out that they had actually been parked across the street at a 7-Eleven gas station parking lot.
That's the pictures I saw.
Yeah, taking pictures of the store for a couple of weeks of everybody that went in, which was relevant later because all these people they thought were breaking the law, yet they stopped nobody.
Yeah.
And stopped them from taking this paraphernalia there.
Yeah.
So anyway, they pretty polite. They asked me, to open the cash register first, really. If anybody else is in there. I was like, no, it's just me. And then they asked me to show them around the whole store. And with the register thing, they just said, we're gonna get in the register when you can let us in, or we're gonna get in. The warrant says we can get in, so just go ahead and open it, save time. And then some officers went into the room immediately and just started looking through inventory and writing stuff. They started bubble wrapping. And then they had me sit down with the guy, and I was like, yeah, I probably should call the owner of the store first. And our attorney's like, well, we'll let you, but just, hold on a minute, and why don't you have a seat here with Detective Lowe? He's just going to talk to you for a minute, And I was like, okay. And it's, it's easy to say, like, when you haven't ever experienced something like that, remain silent, don't say anything. When you're by yourself and the police just come in and raid your store with, 8 people. And, they're like, yeah, we'll actually just hang on and have a seat. And we're just going to talk to you for a second. So you're, yeah, okay.
You just happily agree.
Yeah. We can get out of here real quick.
I mean, this is kind of what I've learned over the years. I'm like, I think they're trained to use it.
They absolutely are.
Absolutely. It's fine to a degree.
Absolutely are. And then, thankfully, I did not say anything that incriminated myself. I had to listen to myself on recording and trial, which I hate hearing myself talk. So I don't watch videos of me.
So you're not going to listen to this podcast.
I have listened to a podcast of myself before. I probably will listen to this. Maybe.
You're just, a lot of people
and just like my voice doesn't sound like that. Anyway. So, he talks to me for about 30 minutes. And I'm just like, I'm the general manager. Yeah, serve on the city council, and so on and on. And, these attorneys, they've said all this is fine. Anyway, they finally gets done talking to me. He's like, all right, go ahead. You can call the owner if you want. And I call Robert. I said, the police are here. They said they have a warrant. They're taking everything. So you might want to get down here. You might want to call the attorneys. They said, all right, you can leave, and we'll call you when we're done, and you can come back and get the key and whatever you want to do from there. And so I was like, okay. So I'm standing outside. Robert shows up. They won't let him inside. They're like, no. There's an officer at the door, and he says, no. And what he tells Robert is, we don't want marijuana legalized. We don't want your element in our town. Yeah.
Period.
Yeah, that's it. And you're not going inside. When we're done, we'll let you back in. And so, we just hang out. I think it was 5-6 hours. And then when they left, they gave us the key back. Went inside. They had taken pretty much everything out of that room. Anyway, they'd taken all the money in the store, out of the register and everything. And our attorneys, Breck and Blake, there's no media news of this, and we didn't post about it. I didn't post about it. We're just like, okay, let's just see what happens here.
Yeah.
Our attorneys say, okay, go ahead and restock. Because I guess that's the same thing they had the Funky Monkey do, was go ahead and restock and just continue on with your business as usual. So, restock. Okay, how do we do that? So the next morning, 6 a.m., Robert puts me on an airplane flight to Austin, Texas. I get down there, I rent a van, and I visit 2 of our distributors, 420 Science and Grav Labs. And they just load me up with whatever they've got lying around, basically. They're pretty great people down there. And so I spent the day hanging out with them, loaded me up, and then I went and hung out and had lunch with one of Robert's friends that lives down there. And then I drove it back. Mm-hmm. And the next morning, we restocked the store. The Transcript did an article with Cody on the front page, holding one of the pipes, says, Friendly Market restocks, reopens, whatever. And so the next week, 10 days later, 10 days after the raid, so on December 10th, the raid was on December 1st. December 10th, I think it was, in the afternoon, get a call from our attorneys. I'm at the store working, actually, and get a call from Brecken. He says, Stephen, I'm going to need you to go ahead and leave the store. You can go home. You can go. I wouldn't go home. You should go somewhere else. But there is a warrant been issued for you and Robert's arrest. Charges of possession of drug paraphernalia, and for a felony charge for basically the money in the store they claimed was drug funds, and because it was concealed in not only a cash register but a bank bag that was in my briefcase. As the general manager of the store, my job was to take deposits from the previous day to the bank, right? So, the only way for that not to be illegal was I would have had to be holding the money out so that it wouldn't be concealed. But if you put it in anything, it's concealment of illegal funds. So, felony charge. So, pretty serious.
Yeah.
We're pretty shocked at this. And I'm just thinking...
It's just you and Robert.
Just me and Robert. Just me and Robert for that initially. It expands later, but...
Yeah.
And I know this is a really long story, but it's really detailed.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's lots of details, and sometimes you think of parts of it. It's just Robert and I, and so I get a hold of Robert, and so it's too late in the day to go appear at the courthouse. It's 5:00 in the afternoon.
You're not going to.
So did they intentionally wait till the end of the day so that we couldn't go appear and get this taken care of without having a warrant out for our arrest? Which means the police could raid our houses at the middle of the night. Who knows? So, Robert and I stay the night together out of Cleveland County. But actually, in Robert's neighborhood, it's a gated community in McLean County. So, but it's still District 21, which is Greg Mashburn, the DA, represents a 3-county district, and that's how it usually is. And so, still in his district, so we're not, we don't know. Are the police going to come try to raid his house in the middle of the night? And so anyway, our attorneys had called down. They had arranged and said, look, Robert and Stephen will appear at the courthouse 8 a.m. tomorrow morning for an arraignment, and we'll do all that. So no need to raid their houses. They will appear.
Yeah.
Guarantee it. But I don't know. We don't know if they will or not.
Yeah.
So Robert and I walk around this whole neighborhood late at we hardly sleep. We walk around, so we're not actually at the house. And anyway, the next morning does come. They didn't raid come get us. We go up here at the courthouse willingly and get arraigned. And an arraignment means you gotta, the judge tells you what the charges are. You agree that you acknowledge it. Blah blah blah. And then you have to go to the county jail and do a walkthrough and get fingerprints and a mugshot. So we leave the courthouse. We drive ourselves to the jail. We wait in the lobby of the jail for 2.5 hours. And then they finally take us to the back. And they pat us down, check us for whatever. And then we sit in the back for a minute. They give us a sandwich. It's pretty gross. And then they do the mugshot, they do the fingerprints, and then we sit there for a little bit. And then they're like, all right. And they had one person doing processing. It was just the most inefficient.
Yeah.
Just,
What year is it?
Yeah. And so they do it, and they're like, all right, you guys are good to go. And they give us our stuff back, and they leave. And Robert has this fundraiser event for his other company that he's got to go to up in the city because a lot of his clients for that other company are corporate clients. Mm-hmm. And so I just say his other company is a PI firm, so they do investigation work for companies, workers' comp, all kinds of stuff. Yeah. So anyway, he's got to go meet these fundraisers or whatever conference or deal for clients. So he's got to go, and I haven't even been on social media since this really all went down. So I go home and I'm checking everything and seeing this city councilman charged with a drug-related felony.
Oh, so that's when the news.
Yes, and this article about how the city attorney denies telling me that it was okay, that he actually told me it was absolutely illegal and you should not take the job, Steve.
Who printed that?
The transcript.
The Norman transcript?
Yeah. because they called him. Because in my quote about being charged, I guess I made a thing about when I got charged about that, and the city attorney saying it's okay, and I met with him. And, well, the next day, they had an article from him quoting him saying, "No, I absolutely told them it was illegal. Absolutely not." And so, it's blowing up big time.
Mm-hmm.
City councilman charged with drug-related felony and multiple misdemeanors for possession.
That's easy for KFOR
and that's all people see.
Picking up.
Yeah, there's there's no drugs involved. It's just pipes.
Yeah.
That he works at a pipe store. It's, they're selling drugs. He's a drug dealer.
Mm-hmm.
He raided his house. All this stuff. And they don't really talk about Robert. They're talking about every article.
It was Robert,
and it's not just a transcript. It's every news publication, the Tulsa World. The Oklahoman, every small town news station, all of them, yes. Mm-hmm. And it's blowing up. I don't know what this means as far as me serving on city council. I don't know if I'm merely being charged with this, if the other council members are going to kick me off, if there's going to be a recall, I don't even know what this means. And
I mean, all that stuff.
And, the public support was pretty immediate. People came out, support. There were people protesting outside the store, like, this is ridiculous, on the news and everything. People were reaching out, like, I can't believe the police are doing this. This is so stupid. And, again, Norman's is a progressive and more liberal town. The police were not being representative of the views of the public here. And so people were expressing that. This is ridiculous. What do you mean? Stephen works there.
Yeah.
We love Stephen.
I would agree with a lot of what they said, but some of it was like, don't you have better times?
Exactly.
Or
don't you have better
things to do?
Yeah, I was in my almost third year being on the council at that point. The police at the time had been advocating for a Bearcat, which is a armored vehicle, an offensive, defensive. They're like, it's not a matter of if, but when something bad happens, and we need it. It's a real expensive vehicle, and this was just on the heels of the Michael Brown shooting in Ferguson, Missouri, and all the unrest and the riots. That had happened this fall. In 2015, that fall, he was killed in August. Mm-hmm. At that same time, the police in Norman were wanting to get this armored Bearcat vehicle.
Police militarization.
And then and then they're spending 2 weeks surveillancing the Friendly Market pipe store. That our sales were, a good day was $500. Mm-hmm. If we made $500, that was a very good. Our daily goal back then, I think, was $320, $450. Mm-hmm. So, not a big enterprise here.
Yeah.
And we're a sales tax paying business. We're paying taxes to the state, to the city. The city council member works there. We're posting stuff on social media. We're not hiding anything. We're going above and beyond, which became an issue later, but we're requiring people to be 21 or 18 to go in this. There was no law that said you had to be 18 to buy a pipe. And so they tried to actually turn it around on us and say, the fact that they were requiring an ID to go in that store shows that this was all a ruse. Water pipe, tobacco, asking for IDs. It's all a ruse. They're trying to fool everybody. But common sense tells us all those pipes are illegal. And what they're for.
Especially since you need to be an adult.
That's my best prosecutor impression.
That's pretty good.
And so, all of those things going on nationally, locally, and I was opposed to that vehicle. I was opposed to civil asset forfeiture, which was how the police department was proposing to pay for it. I hadn't been completely opposed to the vehicle itself in prior discussions because at the time I really did have a good relationship with the chief of police. We had just hired him a few years ago before I was on council, but he was very progressive, I would describe. He had significantly increased the diversity of the police department from a race standpoint and a gender standpoint. He had brought back, public ride-alongs with the police. He brought back motorcycle units so the police weren't just in their cars all the time. He brought back the community policing philosophy, like go to the barbecues, go get out, go see that business owner if they're sweeping their front porch, get out of their car and go talk to them. Say, hey, I'm John, and I patrol this area regularly. Here's my card. Call me.
Sure.
that type of stuff. So it was great. It was a big change from what we'd had before. And the Norman Police Department historically does not have a very good reputation. If you look at news stories and things that have happened in that department as far as corruption and criminal activity, there are stories that date back decades. There's even a prominent double homicide in Norman from the 70s that involved a Norman police officer. Anybody can Google that. It's public information. There was a steroid scandal in the mid-2000s that resulted in several officers being fired. I mean, problems.
You could look into all sorts of things.
Yes, so breath of fresh air. The new chief was hired from out of state, from a bigger city. And he came in and made changes, but he started advocating for this armored vehicle in the wake of a lot of these different unrest issues. And he was critical of how police responded in places like Ferguson, about how he said, those riots were in large part caused by the police response. What was a peaceful protest turns into a riot when the police show up in armored cars and riot gear and machine guns. And, that's how we do it here. In our community, we don't think that would happen here. But there have been hostage situations where we think a vehicle like this might be needed. We need something to protect our officers if we need to go in and get somebody. Many of our concerns were, are they going to be used for like drug raids in the middle of the night? Are they going to be parked across the street from the stadium on game days? I mean, how expensive is it to maintain this vehicle? Yeah. And you're wanting to use civil asset forfeiture funds for it, which is a controversial revenue source that may or may not come from people who are not charged or convicted of a crime. Civil asset forfeiture allows law enforcement and the government to take your property even if you have not been charged with a crime or convicted. You don't have to be convicted. You don't even have to be charged. They just have to say they suspect it came from a drug deal or derived from drug activity, and they can take your property, and then you'll have to hire an attorney and contest it. And you, because it's a civil matter, will have to prove that it's not from drug activity. So how do you prove your truck wasn't bought with drug money?
That's why we gladly tied your situation. we did just a show just on that.
Yeah.
This is easy, it goes hand in hand.
So those are reasons why I was opposed to it and to that vehicle being purchased. And some people believe that Friendly Market was raided because of my opposition to civil asset forfeiture. And I was openly critical of law enforcement in issues like Ferguson and where I've always had a very strong interest in the police profession and investigation and detectives and, all that stuff. When I was a kid, they wore a cool uniform and their car, they get to drive a cool car. It's got lights on the top and, they're here to help and they protect us from the bad guys, right? And if somebody does something bad, they go find them and get them. Yeah. And, so I was always very interested in it. I went on a lot of ride-alongs before I was on city council. I just thought it was very interesting. I thought at one time when I was younger that I might even want to be a police officer. And, in Norman, I was like, my hometown, I could, maybe help out and help make things better. But help set an example, And so I've always been pretty supportive of the police department, but I've always been very critical, too. Ever since I got politically involved, which happened around 2007 when I was 23, 24 years old. First time I ever got arrested in my whole life. It was in Texas. I was a passenger in a car. My friend was driving. It was his car. We got pulled over. He was speeding by a small town cop, Sanger, Texas. We had smoked a joint earlier, and a little bit of it was still left. It was in the console. And the officer smelled it. He searched the car. He arrested us both. They actually searched the car for about 3.5 hours. Multiple law enforcement agencies on the side of I-35. They thought we had thought we had bricks of it. Yeah. They thought there was a secret compartment, and they couldn't get into it. And they were like, "Just tell us how." And they had us in separate cars, so they could well, your buddy says this, and your buddy, that whole thing. And anyway, this whole long drawn out thing. They didn't find anything else but that little joint and a pipe, little one hitter pipe, you could say. And so they arrested us both, though, took us to Denton County Jail, spent the night. I'd never been arrested before, never been in jail. It was all right, though. It was in a room of 20 other guys, and They were all friendly. It was fine. Everybody was in there for like low level bullshit, I would say.
Yeah.
And so we were like, yeah, we were dressed kind of nice because we had actually just come from a Texas Rangers game. And my friend's uncle owns a really nice jewelry store that's in the stadium and has its own like overlook balcony over the outfield. Okay, cool. So we had dressed nice to go to that. And so we were in this jail cell. And we were dressed nice. And we're like these young 20 guys. My friend, he looks like Heath Ledger. Long blonde hairs. He looks exactly like Heath Ledger. And I've got my long hair at the time. And so we both just look like ridiculous sitting there. And anyway, I'd never had any experience with the criminal justice system before. And I'm raised by a single dad. I'm an only child. My dad's not political at all. My family's not political at all, really. And I didn't know much about politics. I didn't know really much about Democrats or Republicans, liberal or conservative, or how I felt or fell into any of those categories. And I was old enough to vote in 2004, but I didn't. I didn't vote for the first time until 2008. But if I had voted in 2004, I was registered to vote when I was 18. I just didn't vote. And I registered as a Republican, I think because I was 18 and the president at the time was Republican. And 9/11 had happened shortly before then. And I was like, well, we're at war and there's all this stuff going on.
It's kind of the status quo.
And, Fox News says this.
Sure.
The other stations say that. And, the president's Republican. And I don't know. We probably need to have a Republican. Or we probably need to keep the current president because we're at war and we got all these things.
Sure.
And, I didn't know anything. But I didn't vote at all. I registered Republican when I was 18. And then in 2007, when that arrest happened, spent the night in jail, got up that morning to see the judge. The lady that saw the judge right before us, she had been arrested for a DUI and leaving the scene of an accident. And her bail was set at $1,000. So my friend and I get up, and we're charged with possession of marijuana less than 2 ounces, and paraphernalia for the little pipe. And our bail is set at $2,000 each. And because we're out of state, it has to be paid in full. No, 20% get a bail bond money. It has to be paid in full. So that was the first time it really hit me. I was kind of like, wow.
There are certain rules.
There's something wrong with that.
Yeah.
That lady had a DUI and left the scene of an accident while drunk. We had half a joint and a pipe. And our bail is twice hers.
Look, I'm not a judge here, but
there's something wrong with that.
Yeah.
Before that moment, like I said, I had been registered Republican as far as being a registered voter, but had never voted at all. And I had watched some Fox News stuff. My dad is a big football fan. He cooks out. He doesn't get political at all. But he would go to work early in the morning. He would go to bed early at night. And I would stay up late, and I'd watch news stations. I'd watch Fox News or stuff, whatever. And I was just, I thought, well, I believed in the death penalty. I thought, there's bad people, and you gotta punish those people. That if you murder somebody, you've got to be murdered. You've got to be put to death yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to be punished. And I thought, wars were justified, and all these types of things, and that the police were always honest, would never lie.
Yeah.
And the justice system was just. And so if you were in it, you must have done something, right?
Yeah.
Which could be the case, but is the punishment equitable? Having a pipe and a little bit of pot, is it double the penalty of DUI and leaving the scene of an accident?
So
I knew that I had broken the law. I had smoked marijuana, and it was illegal in Texas at that time and everywhere else. So I had broken the law for sure, but that was not equitable.
Those juxtaposed kind of.
Yeah. So that hit me, and that's when I started to realize things. And I started just thinking a lot. And the war on drugs became the topic I started really thinking about. And I started hearing about this congressman named Ron Paul, who talked a lot about the war on drugs and the prison population. And he's like, yeah, that really makes a lot. What he's saying makes a lot of sense. I'm really concerned about that. And he sounds right based on my experience. So that arrest, anyway, it happened in August of 2007 in Texas. My friend had a really good family attorney they hired. Well, I worked in the kitchen at Hideaway Pizza, and my dad's not wealthy. So I had a public defender I had to get. So because of that, I had to go to Denton, Texas, and appear every single time there was a hearing. So I had to go down there, and at the time, I rode a bicycle and didn't have a car. So I had to have a friend or family member drive me to Denton, Texas, and wait for me all day long while I sat in court waiting. Many times it was waiting for my attorney to come say, yeah, they're going to delay it again, come back in 3 more months. So,
thanks.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking, what do really poor people do that don't have really good friends or a family member that can take me down there and wait for me all day long, like on a Tuesday, So I'm really fortunate to have, that, thankfully. And my friend, he doesn't have to go appear because he's got a family attorney. So not a public defender. So a year goes by. I've had to go appear 6 times down there. And thankfully, my public defender is actually a very good attorney. Leanne Breeding was her name, I think. And she was just a very good defense attorney doing pro bono work as a public defender from time to time. And she got my case. And so she was very nice to me. She, hated having to make me come back every time. But she finally was able to get together with my friend's family attorney. They got a hold of the dash cam video from the police car from the Sanger police. And it showed that basically the police report was completely different than what the video showed about the events that had happened that night and how long it took them to search what they found and everything. And so
what was stated in the police report?
That it took 32 minutes. They very quick, standard routine.
Quick check.
Yes. Yeah. And, the video showed differently. The case was dismissed by the judge for an illegal search and seizure and a violation of our constitutional rights. And so I don't know that officer was reprimanded. I'm not sure what happened to him, but I never saw him or heard from him again. But
I would say that's pretty impressive too. Like, how often do you think that actually?
Very rare.
Yeah,
my friend had a good attorney.
Yeah,
and I just happened to have a good attorney.
Did they ever even happen to have like a dash cam?
Oh no! And this was 2007, so
that's
it
actually
even
ahead of its time.
Yeah, and also when we got out of jail that morning, just part of telling the story of the whole experience here is we got out of jail. And I had $12 on me. My friend had about $200. And they gave it back to us in a checks.
Yeah.
And so Denton County Jail is out in the middle of kind of nowhere. And so we're like, okay, how do we go get his car out of impound? It's on the other side of Denton. We have checks and no cash. There's no Uber.
And no car.
And no iPhones at the time. So we're able to get a hold of a cab company who, they work in the area, so they do this all the time. But they're like, yeah, we can take you over to this gas station. They'll cash that check, and then you can pay for the fare. So we're like, okay, do that. Takes us across town, get to this impound yard. And the lady's like, okay, do you guys have this form and stuff? We're like, no, we just came from the jail. Like, okay, well, you need this form from the arresting department before we can release the car. And we're just like, okay, so how do we get that form? And she's like, well, you're going to have to go to the Sanger Police Department, and you're going to have to get them to print out this form. I was like, okay, so how do we get to there?
Yeah.
She's like, I'm sorry, I don't really, that's going to have
that's
to
your problem.
figure that out. Like, okay. Yeah. So we make a few phone calls, and a cab ride up there is a little expensive. It's about 8 miles up, 8 miles back. So, so we just kind of sit there in her little waiting room, and she gets tired of us sitting there. And she goes, well, let me see. I'm going to call up there. She calls up. She goes, well, they have a fax machine. They can fax it over. We're like, okay, great. And do that. We get my friend's car. It's torn apart. It's a mess. We drive back to Oklahoma, get back and everything. My girlfriend at the time, she was like, what in the hell happened to you?
Yeah.
I thought you were coming back last night. And then we all don't hear from him. I was like, well, let me tell you this.
Yeah.
So anyway, that just going through that, and then a years long of appearing in court, only for it to be dismissed because the police lied on the police report. Basically, that's the in the short of it there, and it's dismissed. And this is the summer of 2008 at this point. A year later, and I had started. Like I said, I'd heard about the Congressman Ron Paul, and he was running for president, I think, and. I had gotten very interested in the war on drugs and the prison industrial complex, you could say, and just the private prison industry, and a lot of what he said makes sense. And I was like, yeah, I need to learn more about this. I watched a few documentaries about the war on drugs, trying to get some more history about it. Things I didn't understand, even know about that were going on in this country. I mean. Grew up raised with a single dad, only child, close to the OU campus. I mean, I had some experience, but I didn't know really what was going on in the world. So I had thought, Hillary Clinton's running for president. She's Bill's wife, first lady. She's been a senator. She's probably going to be elected president, right? Bill came to Norman, spoke at OU. I went to that. I was like, oh yeah, the former president's coming to Norman. Yeah, I'll go check that out. I'd never seen a president before.
Wow, yeah.
And he was the president for most of my childhood or, my elementary and middle school years. So I was like, yeah, check that out. And I thought, yeah, this lady's going to get elected, right? She's going to be the next president. And then summer, though, and a lot of people wouldn't understand how Ron Paul would lead me to voting for this person. But I started hearing about this young for president United States senator that was running for the Democratic nominee. And I didn't vote in the primary at all. And he had won the primary already. And he had beaten Hillary. And I was like, this Senator Barack Obama, who's this guy?
Yeah.
I never heard, I'm a novice. And he was talking about, we need to change things. How things are not good enough. And criminal justice and private prisons and putting people in jail for all this stuff. And we got to change things. And I thought, man, I've never felt inspired to vote for anybody before. And
I sure do now.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, things do need to change. And based on this experience I just went through, it's not just. And, I don't think I can support the death penalty anymore because if someone like me can just get wrapped up and have to go through a year-long ordeal that, the police lied about me. And I was dressed nice. And I looked just like a middle-class white, kid, 23-year-old from OU, college kid. And I still had this whole ordeal I had to go through. And I wasn't rich, very low income, and worked at a restaurant, like I said. But still, if that could happen to me for nothing, it could happen to anybody. Yeah. And in fact, it guarantee it is happening to people right now, innocent people. And this Obama came in and, had a lot of things to say that made me feel inspired that, okay, we need some leadership that recognizes these are actual problems. And he did, lots of debate about his ability to accomplish changing those things and, all that. But at that time, he made me feel like he recognizes what the problems are. And he is making me feel like he might be able to do something about it.
I think I can definitely see the jump from Ron Paul to that. Because, I myself even I remember that time. And, someone like Ron Paul, I know he's libertarian and you can say, oh, well, these ideas don't work or do work or whatever. But that type of person is always pointing out something that's wrong or we shouldn't keep doing. Whether they're right on the other political spectrum or the left or whatever. Yeah. So they can be, they're still kind of like you were saying with Barack Obama, the status quo is not working. Yeah. To a degree. How can we change and or fix it?
At that point, too, in my life, I had been involved in this from about January 2008 is when I moved into it, but it was kind of a cooperative house here in Norman. It was this big old sorority house near Campus Corner over on Dean's Row, formerly DeBar. Is what its name was at the time, but we've changed it to Dean's Row now. But it was an old sorority house. It had 14 bedrooms in it, 30 rooms total. We called it Universe City, and we It had a big kitchen in it. We had shows, bands played there. We had a big art room that had free supplies that people would come in and use. There was a lending library, free internet. People would come in. And it had this big basement. And so some of us lived in the house. Some of the rooms were rented out as studio space to artists or whatnot. We did that for 2 years. And that's one of the things that really helped me build up a notoriety and, familiarity in the community, in the arts, music community, political people, activism. Yeah. So being a part of Universe City played a big role in how I got active and everything. And so when that incident in Texas and going to court ended, again, it was the summer of 2008. I was living in this cooperative near Campus Corner with a lot of politically active and like-minded folks. And I kind of started realizing more and more that, I'm not, I re-registered. I registered as Democrat, and I started feeling like, I'm definitely more liberal about a lot of these issues, especially. And I started really discovering that on social issues, I was like, same-sex people the government shouldn't be telling people they can't be together. That's not right. And we shouldn't be putting people in prison, especially for profit. That should be against the law. There should be no profit in prison. The government's job is not to make profit on things, and that's why the government does things like operate prison. There should never be a financial incentive to lock anyone up, or take anything. There should be no financial incentive to take something from somebody or put them in jail. It should cost us. It should cost us so much to put people in jail that we don't want to do it unless we have to do it. Yeah. Unless there's no choice. There should be no profit. Anybody involved should lose money. The government should lose money on it. It should be a cost of society, and we only do it sparingly when we have to. So I just started developing a lot of those feelings. And I started feeling like, the wars were wrong. And I started really realizing what the motivations for those wars were and how this was way before 9/11. This has been going on for a long time. And these issues and these problems and these interests that are involved. And I was like, it's wrong. And people are dying and soldiers are dying for what? We got Saddam Hussein. Or not, we hadn't at the time, but we conquered Iraq and Afghanistan. We can't even find Saddam anymore. Yeah. He's gone, And it's just like, why are we still there? And it's expensive and we don't have health care. Education is failing and infrastructure is failing. I just started seeing all this, and it helped being around some other people that were more experienced to help me realize it, what I already knew. But anyway, I voted for the first time that year in the presidential election, voted for Barack Obama, and I started voting in every election after that, like no matter what it was, a road bond for Norman or
dog catcher,
whatever it is, I'm voting. Yeah, I'm voting. And so spring of 2009, I helped the mayor of Norman at the time run for she wasn't running for re-election. I think my city council member was running for re-election. Mm-hmm. And I think it was. Anyway, I started getting involved in that. I had been going to city council meetings for a while, for a couple of years. I've been watching it on TV since I was a kid. Because although I knew nothing about politics and had no interest in it, I've always been very fascinated in city planning and infrastructure and architecture. I played a lot of SimCity growing up. Yes, yeah, got it for Christmas one year.
Sure, yeah.
And played
That's
lot
enough,
of
isn't it?
Yes, played a lot of that growing up. My dad got remarried when I was 4 years old to a woman named Jennifer, and she lived in Dallas, and she worked in the tallest building in downtown Dallas, called the Green Building, because I think it changes colors now, but it used to just be green at nighttime. And so I thought that was so cool. There were no tall buildings like that in Oklahoma, in Norman especially. So I'd never seen anything like that. And I just thought, that's really cool. The downtown, that's cool. And as a kid, my dad would take me to the diner here in Norman, which is down here on Main Street. And it's an old diner. It's been a diner for 100 years. It's really skinny and narrow. It's something you'd see in like New York City or a big city, something like that. So it's really cool. It's not like what you would generally see in a small town or even a town like Norman. And so just as a kid, I always thought like Main Street was cool. It looked different than the rest of town. Something about it really, I thought was really cool. Yeah. And then tall buildings, I thought those were really cool too. And so by the time I was in high school, I started taking all the architecture and drafting and design classes that Norman High offered. By the time I was a senior, I had taken all of them. So I went to Moore Norman Technology Center for a year. to do computer drafting and design, which wasn't as much fun as drawing. But I had a lot of background in that. And so I would watch city council meetings starting about middle school because, like I said before, my dad would go to bed early. I would stay up late. And I'd usually either watch the school channel or the city council channel because they would just have replays. And they'd have like little slides of information like this street's closed. And, or the school channel would have a thing. So I'd watch that. And you'd see presentations for development projects or like a road project, blueprints. And I just thought that stuff was really cool. I liked knowing that there was like a new business that was building, they're building a new Taco Bell over there or something. I just thought that was cool to know that stuff. And when I would tell people, they'd be like, how do you know that? Like, well, I watched it.
Actually, it's like inside information.
Especially when you're like in 6th grade, 7th grade.
Yeah.
Like, who knows?
Who are you?
And a couple of the council members had like cool names. Like one was Kevin Pipes and then Richard Stowicki. Kevin Hopper, I think, was one of those. Anyway. So I'd watch them. Started going when I was in high school. One of the requirements of one of my classes senior year was to go to a city council meeting, take notes about it. So I'd never been before, but I'd been watching it for years. So I started going a little bit here and now. And then once I got involved in that, co-op house, University, at the beginning of 2008, that's when I started going to city council meetings regularly because I was like, we're doing this like co-op deal here. We're trying to have a community, house, and we've got these shows, bands from all over the country, even from Europe that were traveling across the United States would write us on MySpace and say, hey, we're such and such. We're passing through Oklahoma, and there are very few DIY venues in your state, but you're right in the middle of the country, and we're on our way to Dallas or on our way to LA or wherever. But we found your place here, and it says you've got, you can help us out. And we said, yeah, we've got this big old house. We would use the living room. At the beginning, it was the basement, but we moved it up to the main floor living room so people wouldn't have to go down in the basement. It's just, if something happened.
Sure.
So did that. And said, yeah, we don't charge cover to get in because it's a house venue like this, and we're not a business. I was like, I go to all these council meetings, and I'm trying to do this right. But what we can do is, since you're not coming out of your way to come here, you're on your way somewhere else. Guarantee you a place to stay for the night here at our house. We're right next to this place called Campus Corner. There's a convenience store across the street from us. There's several restaurants and other businesses around here, and we're just a few blocks from the downtown also. So there's lots of stuff around here for you. Any merchandise sales, any tips, contributions, all yours 100%. So you've got a place to stay, you've got a bathroom, you've got other things around here. And, if you can get, for them, it was like if they could get $20 for a tank of gas, that paid for that. Yeah. That paid for that. So, that was our offer. We can help you out, but we can't collect a cover charge for it and guarantee you anything other than a roof.
Yeah.
And so, and we'll cook. There's food here. You can help yourself to anything you want. So, that was how we did that. We did it for 2 years. So I started going to council meetings all the time so that I could be, develop a relationship with local officials, with the police even. The convenience store across the street, police would often park over there and go get coffee and whatever. And I would notice this one officer would always be over there. He'd go over there and usually hang out there for about an hour. He would hang out and talk to the clerk in there, and sometimes he'd stand outside for a minute. And so I started going over there and introduced myself, and we swapped cell phone numbers, and I was like, yeah, I have this house over here, and we have shows, and it can be loud sometimes, so if there's ever any issue, with that, just give me a call, and we'll make sure it gets taken care of, and that way you don't have to come out, and, there's other things, I'm sure, to deal with, and he's like, yeah, I definitely appreciate that, and his name is Marcus Smallwood. He is what I would describe as the example of how police officers everywhere should be, and if they were, I suspect there probably would be very little to no problems between community and police relations because he's a retired Navy guy. He's wanted to be a patrol officer so he could be out there, and he's the most polite, calm guy. I've never seen him put his hand on his gun. He doesn't raise his voice to people unless they raise his to theirs to his. Yeah. He always tries to make people feel calm so that they don't
It benefits
flip out, and possibly risk his life. So, yeah. Anyway, so we developed a good relationship that way, and so, like I said, going to council meetings, I got to know the mayor and my council member very well. We had a big community block party in the summer of 2009. We closed off the whole street at both ends. Police came and did a presentation about community policing. The mayor came. A bunch of neighbors came, and we had a big art show. And I think some of the rooms were not rented out, so we let artists come in and, like, you can have this room, and that can be your gallery, and that'll be yours. And we'll have
show
a big,
off your stuff.
Yeah. And so it was awesome. It was great. We just opened up the whole house to the whole neighborhood. Mm-hmm. A few months later, unfortunately, a few days before Christmas, fire marshal came and did an inspection, and that night said, all right, I can give you guys 2 hours, clear out all your things, and get out. So 11 people lived there, several students, the head chef at the Earth Deli or Cafe, Earth Grocery Store Deli, myself, some others lived there. They gave us 2 hours to get all of our stuff and get out. 6 days before Christmas on a Friday night. So that was a big deal. We all went to the following council meeting and got up and spoke, and were like, there's certain rules and stuff and whatever, but to kick people out of their home with only 2 hours notice, it's winter time, it's a Friday night, it's 6 days before Christmas, and so on and on, this isn't right. And so because I had known the mayor and stuff, and we were able to get some meetings with city staff, and they couldn't show us where we had violated the law. They just said, no, that's just the way it is. And the fire marshal has a lot of authority, and if he says that it's not, then it's not. And it's just like no dealing with it. And we're in our early 20s, and we're not going to be able to go hire an attorney to go sue the city over it. So,
or even find out or anything.
So anyway, a couple of us ended up getting a house together, a small house somewhere else. Another guy and I tried it. We keep booking shows. We had months of shows booked in advance. And we keep doing it at some venues around and whatnot, around Main Street. And as long as we could, we eventually stopped doing it. It was just too much of a hassle to try to book shows without our own venue, especially not having a house. It's just a different setup than relying on a bar or a business to be open.
Of course, yeah.
And the bar started booking some shows without telling us, and then they'd show up at the same time and we'd be like, you didn't
just
tell
us.
Just
a bunch of confusion.
Just anyway, the mayor and my council member at the time both had to run for re-election that year, 2010. And, they were both like, I know, really sucks what happened. We're really sorry. Help us make sure that type of thing doesn't happen again. We're running again. And I really liked the mayor at the time and my council member, so it was no question I was going to help them out. So I knocked doors. I had never campaigned for a candidate, never done anything. I knocked doors, did some stuff. They both got reelected. And then the summer of 2010, right after they both got reelected, an older lady, activist, who I had worked with on some other, like this nonprofit radio station thing, she called me. She wrote me a message on Facebook and said, "Hey, Stephen, you've been going to city council meetings all these years. You've been, really involved. You know so much about the history of Norman. Your family's been in Norman for a really long time. I don't think council member Cubberly is going to run for re-election in Ward 7 next year. You should think about moving to Ward 7 and running for that seat. And if you do, I'll support you. And we'll get others too." And I was like, well, okay. I never really thought about running for city council. I'm pretty shy, introverted, never was on student council, never did anything like that, never had any vision of being the leader of, which interestingly enough, I did play quarterback in high school, but I was not like Baker Mayfield, unfortunately, when it comes to the presence on the field and that leadership aspect. I was very quiet, and that doesn't work very well for playing football. But so I was like, I don't know. I didn't really like even asking my dad for gas money in high school. Well, I don't think I could ask people for money to run for city council. That's, but I'll think about it. I'll get back to you. It's several months away. City council elections in Norman are every spring, so this was the summer. So it was like, but a few months went by, and there was this controversial city council meeting where the city was voting on a LGBTQ History Month proclamation, just recognizing October was that month. there were a bunch of people that came out that night that were pretty hateful, very angry about it. And the Norman I grew up in, I had never seen that behavior before. I mean, I went to a pretty diverse elementary school in Norman where a lot of international kids go. I was surrounded by a lot of people different than me growing up. And, I didn't really know about the experiences that people may have had in Norman. But to me, I had not seen that side of, I was like, Norman's a college town. Everything seems to be pretty progressive.
Sure, yeah.
So to hear people get up to the podium and just pound their fists and be so angry and mad that the city was recognizing a history month, for GLBTQ people in our community, I was kind of shocked. And then a week later, a kid not much younger than me, Norman kid, committed suicide. A gay kid. His parents were both conservative at the time. Both his parents are very progressive now, I can tell you. Yeah. I don't think they'll ever vote for another Republican again. But that happened. It was devastating.
Of course.
And I decided, Councilmember Cubberly, he voted for the proclamation and then said, and by the way, I'm not going to be running for re-election next spring. He had been on the council for 10 years then, so that's why Mary Frances was her name, had said to me, I don't think he's going to run for re-election next time, so you should think about it. So I had moved to Ward 7. After University got shut down, some friends and I, we got a small house and lived there for a few months. But then when I got that message from her, I started looking for a place on my own, and I found a small apartment in Ward 7, and I registered to vote there and everything at that address. And then Councilmember Cubberly announced he wasn't running. I thought, okay, I think I might do it. So I decided I did. I made an announcement to the paper. A few months went by. I had no money, no experience, had no idea what I was doing. I would just post stuff on Facebook, and I had a voter list of registered voters, and I would try to write people on Facebook and say, hey, I'm running, contact students, all that stuff. On the last day of filing period, which is a 3-day-long thing, I was the only person that had filed for the seat. And at 4 o'clock, 5 p.m. being the deadline, 2 people went and filed. So there ended up being 3 of us.
Yeah.
Again, no money, no experience. A lawyer filed to run against me, and this old lady named Linda Lockett. She grew up in Norman. She was 70-something years old. She had owned several businesses. Her father was a very well-known developer in the 40s, 50s. She had been on the Chamber of Commerce. She helped get the Sam Noble Museum of Natural History here. But she was definitely politically on the very much more conservative side of things. And so, and then the lawyer, I guess she was kind of a moderate. I don't know how to really describe that. She was not very nice, though.
Yeah.
And so I'm 26 years old. I have no idea what I'm doing. And I have no money. On election day, the older lady, Linda, she gets the most votes, but she doesn't get 50%.
So it needs to be a runoff.
The lawyer and I tie.
Oh, wow.
89 votes each.
Wow.
Yeah. Linda got 164. And the lawyer and I tied with 89 votes each. So the official protocol for that, it had been 20-something years since that had happened, 30 maybe, it had been since the early 80s, was they have to send you an official certified letter in the mail, and then a week and a half later you'll appear here at 9 a.m. at the election board, and we will draw one of your names out of the basket. So that's what we did. And they drew my name out of the basket. And you can imagine the lawyer lady was not happy about that. There's actually a picture at the exact moment that shows me smiling and her looking to the side, very upset. So I'm like, okay, and now I'm in this runoff. And so the Ward 7 runoff is the only election that's going to be happening. All the other wards, every year 4 of the 8 city council seats are up for election. Sure. Every 3 years the mayor is. So everything else has already been decided. So the only thing left is the Ward 7 runoff. So only Ward 7 voters get to vote in it, too.
Yeah.
And it's the lowest voting turnout ward in the city.
Yeah.
So luckily, the runoff ends up being on May 10th, and which is a couple weeks after Norman Music Festival. Mm-hmm. So I go. I've always worked as part of the crew at NMF, either doing video, sound, or most recently, I usually am emceeing one of the stages, introducing bands and thanking sponsors.
Sure.
But when I was filming it, I had this podium right in the middle of the main stage crowd that I would stand on. So I brought my signs and I taped them to the podium, and so the whole crowd all saw Holman for Norman City Council, May 10th. So I don't know if they all live in Ward 7, but they're seeing it.
Yeah.
And so in the runoff election, though, and actually ended up raising a bit of money so I could buy those signs from a person who did not know me in person, only knew me on Facebook. And he wrote me a message and said, "Hey, Stephen, we don't know each other, but I followed your post for a couple of years. Really appreciate what you talk about. I really think you care a lot about Norman, so where can I send this check?" He sent me $500. That was the maximum donation, too, you could give. And so that allowed me to buy signs. And because I got into the runoff without even having signs or anything. I loaned myself $100 and did some door hangers. And that was it. Yeah. So yeah, I raised a little bit of money, did signs. I ended up losing by 21 votes. So
that was like you said, your first time.
First time, 2011. I was 26 years old. And I was inspired partly to run by, again, my experiences with that arrest in Texas, with the city shutting down the house I lived in and kicking us all out on the street 2 hours, and then not being able to actually show us where it says that that's the protocol, and I said, okay, fine, I'll just run and I'll be the one that makes the policy, and you're going to have to answer to me.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
And I can tell you, all those people that were involved, except for the assistant deputy fire chief, are no longer with the city. And one of them I helped usher out the door myself. So, anyway.
You're happy about that?
Yes. So that's really how I got involved. 2 years later, I just kept going to council meetings. I had already been going. And a lot of times what happens in local elections is people that run do it on a whim. And if they don't win, you don't see them anymore. You don't see them at City Hall. But for me, I lost, and I lost barely. So I stayed involved. I kept coming to every meeting. I kept sitting in the front row where I always sat. Mayor Rosenthal, because I had helped her get reelected and because I had almost got elected myself and I was involved, nominated me to be appointed to a very important committee that was tasked with overseeing a process to identify basically it is the 2060 Strategic Water Supply Committee. So identifying where Norman's water resources are going to come from over the next 50 years or so. Okay. So very important. It was a 2-year committee, and I consider water to be the most precious resource next to air, I guess, on the planet. So, sure. So a big deal, which really helped me make a case when I decided to run again. And when I lost in that runoff, I decided right then, I'm running again. I can't come that close, having no money, no experience, against someone who had tons of money and tons of experience and not run again.
You kind of saw what was possible.
Yes. Yeah. I was like, if I just get a little bit of help and I raise a little bit of money, I bet I can win. And that's what I did. I got a friend of mine who was a data guru, an environmental activist, he's very involved, a younger guy around my age at the time, and Chris Applegate. And it was really just he and I, and we had a few volunteers here and there, but he was very numbers and data driven. And he did GIS mapping for Chesapeake Energy, so he was very good with maps and taking data and putting it in the right spot. And that's what he did, and we were able to be very efficient about how we knocked doors and where we knocked doors and who we knocked doors and things like that. And he was almost spot on when he said, I think we're going to need this many votes to win. And he said, I think we're going to need 205. We got 220.
So you a little outpaced there.
Yeah, I mean, he was big time. And so, yeah, I ran against that incumbent lady who defeated me in 2011. I ran in 2013 and won. And Mayor Rosenthal got reelected the same night. And 2 other people got elected, defeating incumbents. So 3 incumbents lost that night, and the incumbent mayor, who we liked, got reelected. So it was a big deal. And I would say 3 more conservative council members got unelected, and 3 way more progressive candidates, including myself, got elected. And that had never happened in Norman before.
I think that was part of, especially with you getting elected, being so young and social media and stuff.
Yeah.
It was a part of that, too.
Yeah.
got everyone's attention.
And my second time around, I did raise a bit more money. I raised around $3,000, and I spent about $2,000. But my opponent, she raised almost $20,000 and spent about $15,000.
Wow!
So I didn't even spend all of what I raised, but we spent it very efficiently and effectively. And with social media and the fact that I was already well known, that's how I was able to win by 28 votes in a runoff. Not in a runoff. When I got elected, it was outright. Yeah. But in the third largest city in the state of Oklahoma, I got elected, and then 2 years later, I started working at Friendly Market, and all those charges happened in 2015. The first trial for the Friendly Market happened in the fall of 2016, and that's because, as I mentioned before, after Robert and I got charged, it was just he and I. We got charged. And we restocked the store and all that stuff, right? Well, on December 20th, the police came back because they had seen that newspaper article with Cody on the front holding a paper saying Friendly Market restocks. They came back with another search warrant.
Sure,
all the pipes.
Same thing, yeah.
I remember that morning I was going to the store and I was calling and Max wasn't answering the phone, and I was like, okay. So I got to the store and saw a white paper taped to the door, and I was like, kidding
me? And
how
long was this? Was this from the first raid?
3 weeks.
3 weeks, so it wasn't very long at all.
Nope, 3 weeks. We didn't restock the second time.
Yeah.
And I think January, maybe we had our first hearing. It was just like a preliminary evidentiary hearing.
Sure.
Whatever. And January, we get a call, our attorneys get a call from a group out of Washington, D.C. called the DKT Liberty Project. Their primary objective as a nonprofit is to help people defend themselves against the government, specifically on issues of civil asset forfeiture. So they had read this story of a city council member charged with drug-related felonies and civil asset forfeiture and how I was opposed to civil asset forfeiture. And maybe the police had raided my store because of that. That type of thing. I don't know that is why they did it, but that's a narrative. And I'm like, yeah, sure, maybe. And so they contact our attorneys and they say, hey, our board's already voted, and we will cover all legal expenses related to this case. We think it's a really big deal. So we're like, awesome. We can afford to defend ourselves.
Yeah.
So I didn't know what I was going to do.
Yeah.
Like the owner, Robert, he could afford to defend himself.
Yeah.
But as far as like an employee at the store, unless he just wanted to pay for me too, which I don't know if he could, but it's like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I can't afford $15,000 retainer.
Yeah.
For Wagner and Lynch. They're great attorneys. I'd love to have them. It's expensive.
Yeah.
So this was like the savior coming in, this group. And that throws a major kink in the strategy of the police and the district attorney. They're not used to
opposition.
People with unlimited funds coming in on an issue like this.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of, unfortunately, a lot of the people that have been in ownership of businesses that sell these types of items haven't had the cleanest record.
Yeah,
and Robert is, like I said, in his 60s, never even had a traffic ticket in his life.
Yeah.
He's got 6 grandkids. He's owned a small business for 25 years. He goes to church. He does yoga. He's vegan. I mean, mark it off.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to get anything on him. And so they weren't used to this. They were like, okay, now we've got a defendant here who's squeaky clean. The other defendant is a popular city council. And at this point, I was already in my second term. I had been reelected in February 2015. So before I started working at Friendly Market, I had just started my second term. And now they've got a nonprofit from out of state paying all their legal fees. And the papers are already running things on this. The public's already speaking out on social media, being like, what is this? And a few months go by, and on March 8th, so raid happened December 1st, December 20th. Charges are filed against Robert and I December 10th. It's March 8th, and we didn't even know it, but they filed, I should say, March 6th, Robert and I declined their plea offer. If you guys will agree to this, we'll drop these charges. You'll have probation for this. Supervised probation, drug court, psychological evaluations, fines and fees.
Charges would be dropped, though, against you?
Certain charges. Yeah,
certain
charges would be dropped, but you're going to have 5 years probation. You're going to do this.
Jump through all these hoops.
Yes,
Okay.
and we both thought that was completely ridiculous.
Yeah.
There are no drugs involved in this. Why would I have to go to drug court? Why would I need a psychological evaluation? And it's just no, absolutely not. It's
so
5 years. 5 years.
Yeah, so they were kind of wanting to back out of it, but at the same time still
made a very piss poor effort.
Yeah.
And so we, without hesitation, rejected that deal. And our attorneys, Brecken and Blake, Wagner and Lynch, out of McAllister, I mentioned we hired them partly because of that case in McAllister and because we were familiar with them, but also because they were not local attorneys. And some people would say, well, wouldn't you want like attorneys who, are familiar with the, the judges and the DA and, friends with them maybe? And he's like, well, yes, if you are wanting to get a deal. If you want a plea deal, you don't want to go to trial, you just want it to be over with, then yes, if your attorney plays golf with the DA and the police, that could probably be good.
Yeah.
But if you need to go to trial and you need to keep yourself out of prison, you do not want an attorney who is friends with anybody up here. You do not want a friend or attorney whose kids go to school with the DA's kids. You don't want that because they are not going to be willing to do whatever it takes to get you out of that situation because they're going to have to work with them again.
Yeah.
And their kid's going to go to school.
Sure, they might be friends.
They might be friends. So we hired Brecken and Blake because they were from Southeast Oklahoma. They were trained trial attorneys. They weren't litigators. Trained trial attorneys. They had not only their law degrees, but they also had training from the Trial Lawyers College, which is, I think, in Montana or Wyoming. But it was their specialty. Criminal defense. We're the best. We're the experts. And they're just a small law firm. Probably, I think, 4 or 5 people work in their office. They have another smaller office in Wilburton, which is even smaller than McAllister. And they both drive pickup trucks. They don't wear nice suits. They don't have Rolexes. They're just
they're small business
down to earth, guys, and so very relatable. And they are not very friendly to the DA and the police, and they don't like it. They're not used to it. They don't like it. And when we declined their plea deal offer, it really pissed them off. So within 48 hours after we declined their deal, charges were filed. Well, additional charges were filed against Robert for the second raid, even though it's been 4 months.
Yeah.
And new charges are filed against Clerk Max Walters and Clerk Cody Franklin. 1 count misdemeanor paraphernalia possession charge each.
Were any of these clerks present at any of the raids?
Max was the second one. Okay. Cody was not. But Cody was on the front page of the paper holding a pipe.
So just from that alone?
Yes. And me, I got the exact same. When Robert and I were charged, it was because my business card said general manager on it. And so I got the same charges as Robert at the exact same time. Mm-hmm. So they just treated me as though I was the owner. And a lot of media sources printed that I was the owner. I guess that just sounded better, or that was, whatever.
They just kind of went in.
And so I've spent years explaining that I'm not an owner of Friendly Market. I'm still not an owner of Friendly Market. But it seemed interesting, not coincidental, that they filed charges within 48 hours of us declining their deal, even though it had been 4 months. Had gone by at this point, almost 3. Or it had been almost 4 months. And anyway, they actually go to Max's parents' house on a Saturday morning with a warrant and try to arrest him. Max is our youngest employee. He's 21 at the time. And Max has long hair. You've seen him walk back here a couple times. He has long hair. Kind of looks like a skater kid, maybe, at the time. And so we believe what their strategy was going to be was they were going to go arrest him on a Saturday morning at his parents' house. And they were going to keep him in the county jail all weekend long.
Press on him. Yeah,
and they were going to press on him and try to get him to agree to a deal or to say something about Robert or me or whatever. And thankfully, Max was not home that morning. So they were not able to get him. And Brecken and Blake were able to arrange. We'll have him appear on Monday morning, courthouse, at 8 a.m. We'll do the whole same thing. Same thing with Cody. Yeah. We'll have him appear too. And so that just kicked off the whole thing. And by this point, the media is really involved, even more so now, because now there's 2 more defendants and there's more charges. And we've declined their deal. We're headed to trial, it looks like. We have a preliminary hearing where a judge determines that there is enough evidence to go forward with a trial. And our attorneys told us, they said, it's a 95% chance it will be bound over for trial. It's very rare that the judge will find there's not enough evidence. And they did say, at this point in the proceedings, if the judge finds there's not enough evidence to go forward and he dismisses the case, then you can have legal recourse to sue for loss of business and reputation, so on. But if the judge rules that there's enough evidence to bind you over for trial, then the police and the prosecution will now be immune towards loss of business or whatever, because a judge has determined that their actions are justified.
Okay.
At least to this point.
Yeah.
So that's what kicks it off, a string of hearings to set dates and whatever, and goes back and forth for months. October 2016, we have the first trial for Max. It's a 3-day long trial. He's got 1 count, misdemeanor paraphernalia possession. Unheard of to go to trial over a misdemeanor.
Yeah.
Never happens.
Yeah.
Not even on record of it happening in Cleveland County before. And we present no witnesses, no evidence. The prosecution presents 5 witnesses, all of which are police officers. 1 or 2 are DEA agents. This one is a guy named Van Gerp, real slimy, just ugh.
Gives you a bad feeling.
Yeah. Just, Anyway, they testify against Max. They got Max on video, whatever. And Max, there was one thing that they almost got him on, but he didn't, thankfully. But this DE agent on video is talking about, talking to Max undercover, trying to get make a sale, and he's like, I'm looking for a present for my brother-in-law up in Alamosa. Yeah, pretty friendly up there, and I think he'll like it a lot. I think he'll like this pipe a lot. Up there in Alamosa. I guess, I didn't know this at the time, but Alamosa is a town in Colorado. Mm-hmm. And apparently it's on a highway, and lots of marijuana being legal, and I guess marijuana that's found in Oklahoma sometimes comes from there. I'm not sure.
Sure.
But that's where he was going with it. Trying to be like, I'm trying to get a gift from my buddy in Alamosa, Colorado. It's really cool up there. The law's really cool up there. Yeah. And I think he said some stuff about, we did some crazy stuff back then. And Max said, they did do some crazy stuff. And that almost got him.
That was it?
Yep. Because stuff means marijuana.
Yeah.
Crap.
Crazy stuff.
And this came with our attorneys did a really humorous job of portraying this in trials. They're like, stuff. Crap.
Well, I mean, like one of the civil asset forfeiture things we looked at when we did our episode was a person was driving to California through Canadian County, because that's up for
absolutely.
He had money on him. He had a lot of money on him. He was going to California.
Yeah.
Well, you know what they do in California? Things we don't like.
Yep, absolutely.
So that was enough to take all that money.
That's all it takes. That's all it takes is a suspicion. We suspect.
Opinion.
Yeah, we think so. And the judge in that case is Judge Steve Stice here in Cleveland County. He's what I would describe, very fair. He's a moderate Republican, I would bet. He's a former defense attorney. He knows what it's like to be on the other side. Mm-hmm. He hasn't always got along with the DA very much. They've clashed a bit. And so he's fair, we think. Doesn't sustain a lot of our objections. Sustains more of theirs than ours, we think. Allows some more stuff on their side. But anyway, 3-day trial. The jury deliberates for a few hours, 3-4 hours or so, 5 maybe. And they keep coming back. They can't agree. Can't agree on a verdict. Can't agree. They keep coming back. He sends them back. Finally, he's like, okay. If you're stating for sure, foreman of the jury, you're stating you cannot come to an agreement. Okay. Well, I'm declaring a mistrial. And so they declare a mistrial in Max's case. 4 of the 6 jurors stay in the hallway and talk to us afterwards and tell us, basically it was 5-1 not guilty. There was no drugs involved. There's no drugs in the store. You didn't talk about marijuana. It's not drug paraphernalia. It just died existing. But one juror didn't agree.
That's all it takes.
All it takes. But we thought Max was their slam dunk case, and that's why he did him first. because they thought Max is our youngest employee. He wears his hair down. It's long.
Yeah.
We can get this guy.
Yeah.
And if we can get him, the others, we'll get them too easily. But they didn't. And the next day they said, well, we'll retry that case later. We're going to go forward with the other ones. We'll retry Max Walters at a later date. Because if it's a mistrial, the state has the right to retry it all over again. So a few months go by, and February's rolling around. It's time for me to file for re-election, actually. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm under felony indictment right now.
Could be better.
If I get elected and then get found guilty, I have to step down.
Yeah.
Right. So, so I asked some people what they thought. The attorneys, of course, said, yeah, absolutely, you have to run for re-election. You can't not. You have to. And then all of my supporters, the community was so overwhelmingly supportive. People from all over the state, people from all over the country. But in Norman specifically, the community in Norman was so behind us, it was not even funny. And the police were not used to that, of course. Greg Mashburn was not used to that. He's been a pretty popularly elected DA.
Yeah.
Nobody's even challenged him. Even after our trials were over, nobody ran against him last year.
Yeah.
So anyway, we're thinking, okay, we've had one trial, no conviction. Maybe this has been going on for a year now.
Maybe they'll let it go.
And, I filed to run for re-election. A student at OU files to run against me. She actually agrees with me on a lot of stuff, but she wasn't sure if I was going to run or how all this legal stuff. She was very supportive of Friendly Market. She was kind of libertarian, so she thought it was all bullshit.
Yeah.
And so she's the first openly transgender candidate to ever run for city council in Norman. She is a freshman at OU and lives in Walker Tower with, hundreds of other students, thousands. And so I'm thinking, man, I'm under felony indictment. All this stuff is going on. Lowest voting district in the city. She might be able to beat me. Who knows? I don't know if people want to vote for me based on these pending charges, even if they think I'm not guilty. It's just the risk of. And so, I was able actually to win outright. I won 79% of the vote. I should mention first because I held it so long I lose track of the timeline a little bit. But on February 1st, Cody goes on trial. Facing the same charges as Max, 1 count, misdemeanor paraphernalia possession, 3-day trial, 6 jurors. We present no witnesses, no evidence. They present the same evidence, same witnesses pretty much. These are drug paraphernalia. And jury deliberates for 30 minutes or so. Not guilty. Talked to the jury foreman in the parking lot for over an hour afterwards. And he's like, God, there's got to be more to this story, right? Like, their case was so bad. Like, there's got to be more, right?
Yeah.
There's got to be more. And I told him about it. I was like, no, this is what happened. And he was just unbelievable. And so that happens. Not guilty. And we got that headline out there on the wall in the frame. So I'm feeling pretty good now. Like, all right, 2 trials, 0 convictions, not guilty verdict on the second one. 2 weeks later, I get reelected by 79% of the vote. That's
pretty
significant.
Good. Yeah. It's been more than landslide.
A week later, in the yearly People's Choice Awards that the Norman Transcript does, where people get to vote on their best restaurants, favorite, I get voted best elected official by the Norman Transcript. So reelected by 79% of the vote. Voted best elected official. So reelected to a 3rd term, best elected official, blah, blah, blah. So we're thinking, okay, they're going to drop this, right? They have to. This is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Surely they know that they have no chance. Especially that our attorneys know their strategy. So,
are you feeling a little better?
Feeling pretty good. Feeling pretty good. A few months go by. End of April, it's looking like, well, okay, we're actually going to have to go to trial. They're not dropping it. And Robert and I are going to have to go on trial sitting next to each other. All charges combined, 26 charges, to a felony each, and 12 misdemeanors each for possession of drug paraphernalia. So, 6-day trial, because with a felony you get 12 jurors actually. So a 6-day trial, 15 witnesses testified for the state. We had 1 witness to testify that we brought on. We presented a few pieces of evidence. In the first 2 trials, they presented some evidence that they did not present in the third trial, I think because it was so stupid. But in the first 2 trials, they used some items. Some people may remember in the beginning of the podcast, I talked about the totality of the circumstances, and if you had pot leaf poster and High Times magazines and so on and on. Well, at the Friendly Market, there was a piece of soap that was in the shape of a hemp leaf. And it's called Dope on a Road. They took that and they presented that as evidence. They took a Rolling Stone magazine out of the bathroom. It had an article in it about medical marijuana laws in New York State called Andrew Cuomo's Pot Problem. And then they took a hat similar, you guys won't be able to see it on audio, but Max right there is holding it, similar to that. And on the bill of the hat underneath, right there was a hemp leaf, a brown-yellow hemp leaf, so not even green, like a, the bar of soap was at least green, so I guess you can. Sure. But anyway, they took those items. They took a sticker that was on one of the showcases that said 420 Science, which is a company that supplies cleaning products. Mm-hmm. Anyway, they took those things, presented them, and said, "See, these all together show that Friendly Market was indeed promoting pipes to be used for marijuana. Their intent was illegal, no matter what they tell you. Water pipes, and none of that matters. They're clearly promoting the use of marijuana. Look at all this stuff." Well, they didn't use any of those things in the third trial because clearly the juries thought those were ridiculous.
It didn't work.
Like, are you kidding me? An article in
a
magazine?
Delving for it? It wasn't like it was the magazine opened up to that page?
I don't even think so. Anyway, so they didn't use that stuff in the third trial. And like I said, they put on 15 witnesses, a dozen police officers testified, the chief of police testified, 2 city attorneys testified, the city attorney who said I could take the job and then later said I couldn't, he testified. The city attorney who had looked up the ordinance to see if we had a local law against it and all that stuff, he had to testify.
Was the city attorney, was he testifying for or against?
For the prosecution, against us, yes.
Very nice.
We only put on 1 witness, and so... all these people testified, and it became a big deal because right before the trial started, the day before the trial started, a detective who was involved in the case, the guy that stood out front and told Robert, "We don't want your element in town," got promoted to captain. It was in the papers, Captain Riddle.
Sure, yeah, great.
And so I commented on Facebook, on the police department Facebook, saying, "This is a disgrace. He is a menace to society and should not be promoted when a highly controversial trial, which he was involved in, is about to start."
Yeah.
I mean, tone deaf.
Yeah.
Well, you can imagine his family and all the police officer families out there didn't appreciate that.
Yeah.
And so they all got all up on
it.
Yeah. And so they all started coming to the trials.
Mm-hmm.
They all packed in on their side. And when the chief of police testified, because I had said, Detective Captain Riddles needs to be fired, and if Chief Humphrey stands in the way, he needs to be fired too. And so when he testified, they all came to watch. Riddles did not end up testifying for some reason. But Chief Humphrey did, and when he did, half the police came. I don't know.
Yeah.
And that didn't go over good because Chief Humphrey was not a good witness for the state. And he had a serious outburst on the witness stand because he lost his cool while one of our attorneys was cross-examining him. He did not like having his authority questioned, and he did not like the tone of our attorney Blake and interrupted him to tell him so.
Okay.
In the middle of a question, which caused several jurors to do a gasp and whoa.
So there's some power control.
And the judge was like, "That's enough. That's, just." And so that didn't go over well. They had one city attorney testify, the one who told me not to take the job and that it's all drug paraphernalia. Well, the other city attorney testified that, I don't know about the conversation that he had with Jeff Bryant, the other attorney, but I can tell you, in my legal opinion, we could not have told Councilmember Holman that all pipes are illegal because I would have had to go to the Friendly Market, I would have had to look at every single one of them, and I would have had to apply the 12-step state law to it to determine whether it was drug dead. So we could not have told. He didn't know what the testimony of the other attorney was. So
Sure.
he just said we could not have told Councilman Holman, Stephen, that that it was illegal just by existing. We would have had to pretty thoroughly research that. So we did not do that. And I never had any conversation with Councilman Holman about whether he could work there or not. So basically his testimony about, no, we didn't tell him those pipes are illegal, contradicted what the other attorney said. And our attorney was able to run the primary attorney, the one who testified, saying, I told him not to take it. He was the head city attorney. He's no longer the city attorney for the city. We fired him last year.
Yeah.
But he didn't do very well on the witness stand either. And the day after I was charged, he sent out an email to all the city council and to the DA's office saying how he had told me not to take the job and so on and on. But there was no record of any of that prior to charges being filed to me. So I should have gotten in writing from him that it was okay, but he never put in writing that he told me it wasn't, Mm-hmm. So the last question our attorney asked him on the witness stand was, he went over all that, and he's like, and you didn't send that till the day after Stephen was charged, right? You never put out anything before then. You knew Stephen worked there for 3 months prior to these raids, and you didn't say anything to anybody. But the day after he gets charged, you put out a memo to not only the council, but to the DA's office. Why'd you do that? Why did you feel like you need to reach out to the DA's office? And he's like, so one last question. So, are you familiar with the term CYA? And city attorney sits there for a second and then realizes and goes, yes, I am. CYA means cover your ass. So, yeah, you sent that email the day after to cover your ass.
Yeah.
Because you knew.
He's going to be
rolled
up in this.
Yeah. And so that didn't go well for the prosecution. Their case was just terrible. And they actually, to our surprise, tried to bring in the case from 2007 in Texas, the one that had been dismissed for constitutional violation of rights and illegal search and seizure. They tried to bring that up in the case. And they actually brought a police officer that was there on that scene that night to testify against me.
Wow.
It was 2007. This was May of 2017. This was almost 10 years later.
Yeah.
This was 9 years and 10 months later. And it wasn't the arresting officer. It was just an officer from a different department that had responded as backup that night and didn't even interact with me.
Yeah.
He was just like, yeah. And he didn't even work for the same department anymore. He was now the chief of police in this small town where he was the only police officer. So he had to leave work for a day and have the county sheriff cover his town so he could drive to Oklahoma so he could testify for 5 minutes in my trial, almost 10 years after this incident that he wasn't even really a part of. Yeah. But it was because there was a pipe involved. And they thought,
we can link that
Stephen knows that these pipes are used for marijuana because he was arrested for it in Texas in 2007. See?
Yeah.
Didn't go over well when the jury found out it was dismissed for a violation of constitutional rights and illegal search and seizure, as you can imagine. And, that officer had nothing valuable to testify to. That's why he was only up there for 5 minutes. Yeah. I think our attorney asked him one question. He's like,
what's the
point? He was like, I think our attorney just made a description of me. He's like, yeah. And he's like, and so do you think that's an accurate description of the defendant, Tyler Holman? And the guy goes, yeah, I think so. He's like, okay, no further questions. Yeah. That was it. And so it was absurd that they would how they could think that would be advantageous to them to bring that up. It was just mind-boggling. And that was just indicative of their the whole thing.
It seems like they're leaning very heavily on, a lot of these people will just be, drugs, bad.
Yep.
You're bad. You used them before. That's bad too.
Yeah.
All bad.
Yeah.
That's really it.
So you're going to present a case where it showed the police lied?
Which, sadly might have worked
at a
certain time.
Sure.
Not that long ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And didn't work, thankfully. We put one witness on the stand. We put him on the very last day of the trial. The trial started on a Monday morning, went the entire week. We broke for the weekend and came back that Monday morning to finish it. And because we were out on bail, we weren't in jails, but if, thinking about criminal justice, if we hadn't had that nonprofit, or if the owner, Robert, wasn't able to, pay bail for us, we would have spent a year and a half in jail waiting to go to trial. And we'd be in jail the whole time we're in trial. Thankfully, we're out on bail. Don't spend a year and a half in jail. We're out.
How can you, while you're in jail,
work nothing
against this?
Yeah. What can you do? And then so you can't build public support for yourself
Find
if you're
resources.
in jail. You can't be on social media if you're in jail.
Yeah.
Find resources. Yeah, you're not working. So, we decide on the last day of the trial that we're going to put this witness on. And the trial had gone really well, actually. Our attorneys even were debating with us the night before at the hotel about whether they were going to put him on. Because they were like, what's the gain? It's gone really well. It might be worse.
Sure.
And he was this interesting guy named Max Montrose from Colorado. He's a science guy. He's got red hair. He wears red-rimmed glasses. Very super smart. Like, too smart. And maybe a little eccentric. I don't know how our attorneys found this guy. Yeah. They were looking for a glass expert or a smokable herbs expert who could testify that marijuana, first off, is not the only thing you can smoke out of a pipe. That's absurd. And also someone who could testify about why people would want to smoke out of a glass pipe over metal and wooden pipes. Because we didn't sell metal and wooden pipes. We only sold glass. And so this guy, Max Montrose, they found him. They got him to come down here, and he agreed to testify. And what he does is he founded this thing called the Trichome Institute. He studies marijuana, the plant. He's an expert on it on the molecular level. Yeah. And he basically educates government officials, businesses, anybody on what is marijuana. Why do people use it? What is it made of? How's it made?
What makes it work? Everything.
Exactly, all that stuff. And then he also is what I would consider an expert on pipes or smoking devices. And he was going to testify about how glass pipes are the safest and cleanest device to smoke any substance out of. Because glass is non-porous, so you can easily clean it out where you won't have bacterial growth. Where wooden pipes, you can have mold and mildew grow inside the pores of the wood. You can't get that out, And metal pipes are often made of aluminum and off-gas, harmful things if you breathe it in when they're heated, and glass doesn't do that. So we said glass pipes are the cleanest and safest device to smoke any substance out of. And there's all these legal herbs, legal in all 50 states, that have this long, thousands of years, historic use for all these medicinal purposes. And I use this one, and this one, and this one. We're thinking, do we even need to put this guy on? What benefit? Will the jury think he's a smartass? And we don't. He's from Colorado, so they kind of had to coach him down a little bit. They didn't want him to make the police look stupid or respond, because he had some quips that he would sometimes
throw in a line.
It's
funny, but
we know this is ridiculous. We know this is absurd from where you're coming from, but here, this is what we're dealing with. So we decide, we're going to put him on. And he comes on the last day of the trial. He's the last witness. The prosecution, questions him, mainly just questioning his credentials, what makes you an expert? What's your degree in? Sociology? How does that make you an expert in pipes? Do you smoke marijuana? And this is what really threw him for a curve. He said, yeah, absolutely, every day. Because I'm in Colorado where it's legal. Usually they can get people twisted around that, because we say no, they're like, oh, so you never have? Or, you've never this or that? And then he's like, what? So, but he's like, yeah, I do every day. And the prosecutor was almost stopped right there. He was just and this guy is a hotshot DA too. He's not the district attorney, Greg Mashburn. He's his top assistant. His name is John. ADA. His name is John Peavyhouse. And he's narcotics prosecutor of the year, statewide. He's hotshot. Doesn't lose. Bald head, goatee, glasses. His head gets beat red when he gets mad. Anyway. And he's extremely boring. He talks a lot. He talks for hours sometimes. Wow. And he has this thing, he checks it off. He just goes down and he checks it. And his tone never changes. It's the exact same thing. It's
hope he never does a podcast.
It's bad. It's bad. It's bad. Everybody will have to turn off that one. I'm sorry. So the jurors didn't like him at all. He was a complete turnoff. They loved our attorneys. One of our attorneys is like, he's quiet, tells a good story. The other attorney, Blake, is real good looking, charismatic, and,
nice guy.
So they love our attorneys. They don't like the DAs at all. And so the DA, he's trying to, he asks questions of Max Montrose, goes back and forth, whatever. And our attorneys you get up there and ask him, have him testify about pipes, why glass is the best, why we would sell glass over other things, why it's not just for marijuana, why that's absurd, so on and on. And it goes good. So no harm. They have the owner of Cohiba Lounge, as you mentioned before, the pipes, tobacco, cigar store over on Campus Point. They have the owner of that place come in and testify against us. And they do this because his store sells tobacco products but does not sell glass pipes.
So it's kind of like, hey, why do you need to do it?
Yes.
If he doesn't have to.
So he's an expert. He started his business in the 70s. He's a tobacco expert. He's going to testify about why people don't smoke tobacco out of glass pipes commonly. So he's an older guy, though. And, he's never been on a witness stand. He's never been cross-examined by trained trial attorneys. And so the fact they put him on the witness stand just kind of showed how inept they were. He had no business being on that witness stand.
Yeah.
And it was really neglectful for them to put him on there and subject him to a cross-examination by expert trial attorneys that were going to twist him all over.
Yeah.
And they did.
And try and tear him apart.
And they did. And they did it very nicely.
Sure.
They didn't try to make him,
But it's their job.
But they did, and they basically got him to admit on the witness stand he doesn't sell glass pipes because years ago the police scared him. The police told him it was illegal. So that's why.
Yeah.
Not because you can't.
Yeah.
And our attorney,
against the law.
Our attorney Blake was actually able to find out that they used to sell glass pipes. And a specific one that was a wooden pipe with a glass bulb on top that you could put brandy or whiskey in, and it would filter your smoke through it.
Wow.
And they stopped selling it because the police told them you can't sell glass pipes. So that witness didn't go over well with them, and he basically testified, I don't sell them because the police intimidated me. So
kind of like these guys.
So anyway, that's the closing stuff, closing arguments, the prosecution, their whole case is it's common sense. Come on, look at these pipes. We all know what this is for. We all know. So the evidence is overwhelming, and you have to find them guilty. You have to. They have these big boards and presentation. They're like, see, and this, and this.
Yeah.
All that. Common sense equals this. We took pictures of it.
That's great. It's like a math
common
equation.
sense guided by something equals justice. It was so stupid. Anyway. So judge dismisses the jury to go deliberate. She dismisses the courtroom, and they won't let us stay in the courthouse. They make us go sit outside or go leave, whatever.
Yeah.
And we'll let you know. They'll call you when there's a verdict. So we don't go anywhere though. We all just hang out outside the front of the courthouse on the steps. And some media people come, and a bunch of friends come, and people drive by and honk and wave. We take a big picture in front of the steps, all of us, all our families and stuff there. And we're all just waiting. Several hours go by. And, it's 26 combined charges, 2 felonies that they're looking at. They're trying to apply a 12-step state process to each of those to determine whether we were in possession of drug paraphernalia and whether the money is from drug activity. And you got to get 12 people to agree on each of them.
Yeah.
So it takes a long time. And, hours go by, it gets dark, we're still there. The court got dismissed about 3:30 in the afternoon. It's approaching about 8:45 at this point. Getting a little nervous, just like,
it's been a while.
Let's go on. And finally, phone rings, got a verdict. It's like, all right, they're not, no mistrial here, I guess. So they got a verdict. We're either guilty or not guilty, I guess. So we go up there. March up back to the court. It was on the top floor of the courthouse. We go, all get in the elevator, go up there. Before we go in the courtroom, though, we all our family and friends are there, and our attorneys pull us aside and they say, "Look, And Robert really didn't want to hear this at all, but I was more realistic. I was like, I want to know what all scenarios are here and what could happen.
Yeah.
Robert really wanted to believe we're not guilty, and I believed that, and I was confident, but it was just like, I don't want to be surprised.
Yeah.
So they pulled aside and they said, look, if you guys are found guilty, you are going to be taken into custody immediately, and you are going to be there for a while. We will file motions tomorrow to appeal, but it could be weeks, it could be months. Just so you're prepared, we'll do everything we can, but that's what'll happen. We're not going to be able to get you out. There's no bail for this.
Yeah.
And
this is it.
Yeah, this is it. And so, just so you guys know. So, before we go in the courtroom, I take my phone, my wallet, my keys. I give them to my girlfriend. Robert, all of his grandkids are there. He gives his phone and his wallet to his wife. Hug everybody, and we go in. We all go in. The police are all sitting on one side. Detective Newell, who is the lead detective, the head witness for the prosecution, his wife and his daughter come. So they didn't like my comments about him in the paper either. So they're all there to watch. They're all there to see us get convicted and taken into custody, and so they can feel good about what they did. And we all sit down. The deputies come and stand over us. And that's when I really felt nervous, really for the first time. I thought, here we are. This is it. All these, it's a year and a half since this started, and now it might be over. And, I'm thinking, I'm pretty confident we're not going to be convicted of those felony charges. That's so absurd and far out. No way. But there's 12 misdemeanor charges. The state did put on 15 witnesses. They spent all this time. All these jurors were here for 6 days, missed work. Are they going to convict us of one of these? Just to, say, well, we got to do one.
Something here, yeah.
That's what I was afraid of. We were going to get convicted of one of these. It may not have meant jail time, but it meant I don't have a job anymore. We're not getting our stuff back. We're not reopening Friendly Market, Because after the second raid, when they took our stuff the second time, we didn't restock. And we were able to keep the store open for about another 6 months without pipes before we had to close it up. Mm-hmm. And once we realized this is going to go on for a lot longer, these court proceedings. So we closed the store up May 1st, 2016. Yeah. And put everything in storage under the assumption, we're going to win this. We're going to reopen. So we just put it all in storage. That's what we did. Closed the store May 1st, 2016. Not reopened, but our trial started May 1st, 2017.
A year later?
Or it was, 2017, yeah. A year later, exactly, is when our trial started. And so I'm thinking if we get found guilty of one of these charges, though, that's it. If it's not the felony, I can still be on city council. It's a felony charge that would kick me off automatically. But, misdemeanor is not going to be fun.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, and throughout that whole time when we had to close Friendly Market, Robert, I didn't have a job other than working at the deli sometimes at the city council. Robert basically, out of his own pocket, gave me $300 every 2 weeks so that I could have, live.
Yeah.
At least, And so that was, just thinking about all that, and we're going to have to keep doing this. What am I going to do? And so the jurors all come in. The judge sits down. She gets the thing from the foreman, and she starts reading, and she says, all right, count one. Defendant Stephen Tyler Holman, a felony for possession of concealment of drug proceeds. The jury finds the defendant not guilty. And that's just a huge sigh of relief right there. Just not guilty of the felony. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
And so now on to the other 12 charges. And so and she reads it one by one. Count two. Possession of drug paraphernalia. State statute, blah, 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 blah. Violation. The jury finds the defendant, Stephen Tyler Holman, not guilty. Not guilty. Not guilty. Not guilty. Not guilty. Not guilty. Not guilty.
Yeah.
And then she gets down to the last one. And I'm thinking, okay, this is it. Like, I'm convicting this last one. And she says, count 13, possession of drug paraphernalia. Found the defendant, not guilty. And I don't even know what I did. I wanted to look at them when they were reading, but the adrenaline was too much.
Sure,
I don't even know what I was looking at. So I just looked over to Robert, and he looked back at me and just a sigh of relief, grabbed his hand, and she started reading the verdict on his charges. And Count 1, felony, not guilty. Count 2, possession of drug paraphernalia, not guilty. Not guilty, not guilty, not guilty. All the way to count 13, which was actually count 26 if you looked at it all together. So Judge Schumacher, she had to read not guilty 26 consecutive times. And the police and their families and the district attorney all had to sit there and watch it. And it was even more meaningful because when we were walking into the courtroom, one of the detectives who was involved in the case looked at Robert and said, yeah, we're going to, or I think Robert looked at him and said, well, Robert's always very polite, very cordial. And the guy responded with something like, yeah, we'll see who's crying here in a few minutes, or something like that. And so it was just like, yeah, not guilty. Walked out of the courtroom free, walked outside of the courthouse, and there was a pretty big crowd waiting. Cheers erupted, cameras, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Took my phone out, posted on Facebook, not guilty on all 13 counts. And it's the most liked post I've ever had in 14 years of having a Facebook. I think almost 2,000 likes on that post. It was shared hundreds of times. I mean, it was a big deal, yes. And so, celebratory. Went home that night. Couldn't sleep really.
Yeah.
And then the next day, we were just, of course, in the papers, not guilty, and just everybody's like, congratulations, I made it. And DA quoted as saying, well, nothing's changed. It's still drug paraphernalia, and we're going to move forward with going to trial for retrying Max Walters, and we are going to prosecute Robert Cox for the 2 remaining charges from that second raid. So nothing's changed. Nothing's changed. And it was just like unbelievable, really. Yeah. So a month goes by. ACLU of Oklahoma gets involved. They had been somewhat, they had been supportive, but they hadn't really done like a big deal. And so they did, though. They did this big press release, and they basically had everybody that's got to sign up to the ACLU in Oklahoma click this, send an email to Greg Mashburn's office to drop charges immediately. And that happened over a span of a weekend in that June, so a month after we'd been found not guilty. And that Monday morning, he issued a statement saying, I'm dropping all remaining charges, and I'm returning the money. We are not returning the property, though. It's drug paraphernalia. The juries found the defendants did not possess it, but they did not determine that it wasn't drug paraphernalia. And it is, and we're not going to give it back. It would be illegal for us to give it back, in fact. So we're going to keep it, and we will destroy it. So based on that comment in the paper, I guess, the city attorney's office has to contact them and say, you can't destroy it until a court gives you, permission to do that. Legal authority. And so we have to go appear in court July 5th, I think it is. We got all our money back. We took a picture with the check and everything. Got the money back. It was only about $5,000, so, and that was part of the DA. Their whole thing was like, this isn't political motivated, or we didn't need money. My budget's $6 million a year. What do I need $5,000? But the thing about civil asset forfeiture, and many of you may know it, is that most civil asset forfeiture cases are under $10,000, because that's kind of the threshold where they believe if it's under $10,000, most people are not going to go hire an attorney to go get it back, because it might cost you more in attorney's fees than to get your money back. So they know that. So very deceiving for him to be like, my budget's $6 million. What do I care about $5,000? That's ridiculous. But that's exactly how they get.
It's a way of saving face.
Absolutely. So we have a hearing in Judge Stice's courtroom, who again had presided over the first trial. He was very familiar, and as I mentioned, was a former defense attorney himself, and what I would describe as a moderate Republican, not a big fan of government overreach, that type of stuff. And so we had a hearing in there. The state argued that, this is a civil matter now. The defendants were found not guilty of criminal charges. And in civil asset forfeiture, the defendant has to prove that these items are not, related to criminal activity. It's not our job to prove anything anymore. And we can't return this property. It is drug paraphernalia. for this reason and this reason. And Judge Stice just, went back and forth, and he just said, look, we've had 3 trials, 0 convictions. I presided over the first trial, and we've already determined in this hearing today that the rightful owner of the property is undisputedly Robert Cox, right? And based on the evidence presented here, which is you have presented no evidence, the state presented no evidence. They just said it's drug paraphernalia. Yeah. They have to prove it's not.
Yeah.
And Judge Stice said, look, you've presented no evidence that says that these are drug paraphernalia. And according to the state law, I would have to bring every single pipe in this courtroom, and I would have to look at every single one of them individually and apply the 12-step state law to each one of them
so the totality of
to determine whether it's paraphernalia or not. And I'm not going to do that. And so what I'm doing is I'm not ruling on whether these are or are not drug paraphernalia. That is up for the Supreme Court of the state of Oklahoma or the state legislature to clarify. But it's not my job to clarify that here. All I'm here to determine is whose property is it, who does it belong to, and we've determined that the property belongs to Robert Cox. So I'm ordering that all property be returned to the rightful owner, Robert Cox. Case closed. So, it's not over. It's been 2 months since we were found not guilty. We don't have our stuff back yet. We got some money back. We don't have our property back. And we need that property back so we can reopen the store. Basically, Robert spent his entire life savings to open the store the first time. We didn't have 20 extra grand to go out and buy and restock the shelves. We had enough money. We could sign a lease, get the utilities going, and get open. But we couldn't spend a bunch of money on,
inventory
restock. So we needed this stuff back. It was about 15 grand worth of product. We needed it back. And so we're like, okay. Stice ordered them to give it back. Well, they have 10 days to appeal, so nothing can happen for 10 days. And District Attorney Greg Mashburn waits the full 10 days till 4:55 p.m. on a Friday, on the 10th day or whatever, and files an appeal, an emergency relief to the state Supreme Court. We need emergency relief. We cannot give this stuff back. It is drug paraphernalia. And if we give it back, we're going to be in the commission of a crime. And we're going to be putting drug paraphernalia back on the streets that kids are going to get a hold of, so on and on. And Judge Stice is a derelict of his duty by not determining whether that was drug paraphernalia or not. He neglected to do his job, and we now need emergency relief. One, criticizing a judge for his job performance, not great. No. And so we have to wait another month. They schedule a hearing at the Supreme Court of the state of Oklahoma. We all go up there. We walk in. I've never been in the state Supreme Court building before. Walk in the lobby, rotunda, whatever. There is a giant replica of the peace pipe that's on the state flag of Oklahoma. The state flag of Oklahoma has a pipe on it to smoke herbs out of.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So there's a replica of that pipe, big one, made out of aluminum or titanium, I don't know, metal, right when you walk in. So I see it, and I think, oh, that's cool. I'll take a picture of it. So I'm taking a picture, and a photographer from the Oklahoman takes a picture of me taking a picture of that. Next day, that's on the front page.
Sure.
It's just kind of ironic that
we're
there for pipes. There's a giant pipe that might even fall under what paraphernalia is, according to the Norman Police Department, right here in the Supreme Court. So come on and get it. Anyway, the Supreme Court hearing is in front of like a referee, not in front of the actual people, justices. So it's behind closed doors with the attorneys. We're not in there. We're sitting outside. They're in there for like an hour and a half. They come back out. They're like, all right, they'll have a decision on around September 9th, 10th for us. So just got to wait another month. So like, okay. So we wait. Finally, we get I think it was September 10th. They issue an order, a unanimous decision upholding the lower court ruling, return all property to the rightful owner, Robert Cox, Stephen Holman, Max Walters, Friendly Market, Inc., whatever. And We thought they might take the case, actually. We were concerned because our attorneys at one point did argue in one of the trials, and all the trials actually, that the state law, the 12-step thing, was unconstitutionally vague. Law enforcement can't agree on what the interpretation is.
Sure.
There's no way any individual could possibly interpret what all of that is. And, there's just too much leeway here. It's not properly defined. Unconstitutionally defined. And so we thought, well, the Supreme Court might take this because the legislature clearly didn't define it very well. There's this legal, gray area.
There seems to be some problems anyway.
So we thought, they might take this, and that could take a year.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, gosh, the idea of being closed for another year. We've been found not guilty. We got our money back.
Life is just whittling away,
Yeah. So no, they issue a unanimous ruling upholding the lower court ruling to get our stuff back. So attorneys say, it's going to take a while, process all the paperwork, get everything signed. So, go start looking for space. And I had been pretty adamant before we even closed the original store that if we had a chance to move or reopen or open another store, that it should be close to Main Street in downtown Norman, as close as we could get, maybe even Campus Corner, but in a walkable area that people can ride their bike to, that's close to a neighborhood, maybe a historic building, but specifically Main Street so we can be part of the Norman Music Festival, Second Friday Art Walk, other events that go on. So, do that, and we'll wait until we get these orders signed. We'll get your stuff back. So we started doing that. The owner's son, Wes, and I just started driving around town looking for any for rent sign in any storefront, we would call it. Some of them were like, yeah, we don't really want to have a pipe store and anything yet. We don't really want to do that. We're, skeptical. But we found this spot. I was real familiar with this building. This building had been redone about 6 years prior by a really prominent local architect named Brent Swift. It's a historical building, Art Deco style architecture from the 1930s. It was originally or historically a grocery store that my grandparents actually used to shop at when my dad was growing up.
It's a great neighborhood. I used to live a block that way.
Yeah. My dad grew up just a few blocks from here. Porter, the street out here, is a very busy street and is 2 blocks south of Main Street. And Porter was the original interstate through Norman. So before I-35 existed.
77, I guess, right?
Highway 77. So if you wanted to go from OKC to Dallas, you would have had to drive right past here. Mm-hmm. We have the interstate now, but it's still a very busy street. 2 blocks from Main Street, about 5 blocks from campus. Really great. And actually, when we called about it, the rent was almost $1,000 cheaper than the generic, recently newish strip mall that we were in on Constitution. So I was like, wow, a historic building that's way cooler. It's got high vaulted ceilings and the rafters, all that stuff is just like. So yeah, we signed the lease. We told the people, we said, yeah, we just went through this big case. We won at the Supreme Court. We're about to get all of our stuff back. We're going to reopen our store. We're going to sell pipes. We're going to sell CBD and kratom and whatever else.
Because there's no medical then yet.
Right. The talk about it had been, So October 10th, 2017, Judge Stice signs the order. We go down there and get it. We then, the attorneys and we go down to the police department and back up the truck and load up about 20-something boxes marked Norman Police Department, drug paraphernalia, evidence, friendly market.
Yeah.
Load it all up.
I like the pictures from that too.
Yeah. Brought it back down here to the storefront. The storefront was empty, so we just laid it all out on the floor.
Yeah.
Went through all of it and identified what items were actually used in the trials as evidence. They used about 60 of the 1,000 items they had confiscated, and they had stickers on them that said State's Exhibit number 1, number 2, number 60. And so we took those items, put them separately in a display case, which evolved into a kind of a museum historical showcase with all of them in there. And then we've got the framed newspaper articles, not guilty, DA drops charges, Supreme Court rules.
I'll have to take some pictures of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Please do. So we identified those items. We took the rest of the items And we said, okay, these weren't used as evidence, but they were confiscated. They were in police custody. And so how can we signify what these are since we're putting them in the shelves for sale? And so what we did was we took like blank orange, like price gun stickers, and we just put a blank orange sticker on all of them. Mm-hmm. And then we filled the shelves back up with them. And then when we reopened on Saturday, October 21st, 2017, we reopened and showcased them as saying all these pieces were not used as evidence, but they were in police custody for 2 years, and this is how we have reopened our store. I think there is one of them left. Yeah, so almost 2 years later, we've almost sold all of those, but the actual evidence pieces are still in their own special showcase on display here at the Norman Friendly Market. Some of them, the biggest pipe that was taken, a very large, I have my medical card now, so a very large bong is on display at the Wagner and Lynch law firm in McAllister. Brecken, our attorney, had to wave it around several times. He was threatened with arrest for waving it around in the courtroom for possession of drug paraphernalia. That didn't go over well with the judge, but so he wanted to have that on display in their offices. They're very proud of it. So, if you ever have a legal problem in the state of Oklahoma, Wagner and Lynch are the absolute best attorneys in the whole state. Like I said, I didn't mention that Robert and I, even though there were no drugs involved in this case, based on the number of charges we were facing, if we had been given the maximum sentence and been found guilty, it was 35 years in prison. Yeah, which is twice the sentence. That is twice the sentence that former State Senator Ralph Shorty got for being found in a hotel room with an underage boy recently. Yeah. So just think about that. Working in a store that sells pipes, 35 years in prison. If you ever wonder why Oklahoma has the largest prison population in the whole world, that's exactly why. Yeah. So thankfully, we had jurors that were smarter than that, and we had great attorneys. The public was so supportive of us. And when we reopened, it's been great ever since. And interestingly enough, we reopened October of 2017, and then medical marijuana becomes legal in June of 2018, just, less than a year later. And then in November 2018, we opened our second store in the village, in North OKC, in the town, the village technically, sure, on Hefner Road in Penn. And on January 1st, 2019 is when we officially began the dispensary section of Friendly Market. So Friendly Market, I would just be clear, is not a dispensary. We are a retail store that has a dispensary section in it, but is actually a legally separate entity. But we wanted to make sure that people that don't have a card and that of all ages could still come in our store and shop for things like CBD and kratom and T-shirts and pipes. So you got to have a medical card to come to the dispensary section and to purchase from it. But anybody and all people are welcome to come inside the Friendly Market. And so a lot has changed. A lot has happened in just the last 3-4 years.
Hopefully we won't have to talk about this stuff in the past anymore.
Yeah. It'll hopefully be hard to believe.
Have you told that story just so many times? You're like, is this the last time yet?
Yes, I have told this story so many times. We've even thought that maybe we should put like one of those museum like visual displays up where like when you walk up to it, just the voice comes over and says, "Welcome, let me tell you this story."
Back in
just like
2015.
Because it does happen a lot throughout the days. People come in and they'll be, we'll help them out with something and they'll be standing there looking and they're like, "Oh, what's all this about?" Or they'll be like, "Yeah, I remember that. What? Oh yeah, tell me about that." Or they'll bring their friends in. The other day, two guys from Georgia came in who were friends with our attorneys. They're both attorneys in Georgia. Okay, and they went to the trial lawyers college with them and were familiar with our case and had done some rounds on it and stuff. And they were just coming through Oklahoma. And so he's like, "Yeah, we got to stop in Norman. I got to show you this Friendly Market store because we helped them." So people come by and be like, "Yeah, look at this. I had to bring my buddy in and show him this thing." And so it's just been amazing to see that, be a part of it, and for medical marijuana to be legal in Oklahoma now, and not even just be legal, but to be considered the most liberal of all the laws in the whole country.
Yeah, it's kind of blowing my mind.
Yeah,
because it's kind of like they've taken like the Republicans' stance on business and applied it to.
Yes, and I always knew that that's why would become legal in Oklahoma is because of the money. I always thought if there's, people that oppose to it, often more conservative folks, if there's anything they liked more than Jesus, it was money. And I don't think Jesus was opposed to marijuana anyway. So if a God created everything, then they created that too. So how can you say we can't have it, right? It goes against those teachings.
Do you have any, there was a new law that took place a couple of days ago, the Unity Bill.
Yes.
Is there any concerns as far as you're just general manager?
Yeah, that's right.
Everyone just says it was a great compromise between, business people.
Well, there's some things about the relicensing part that I don't like so much. There's going to be the option for doctors to do 60-day ones. And if the price to get one doesn't change, that's not a good thing to me. To say people are going to still have to pay $200-something and they're only going to get the license for 60 days, that's not right. And that's something the Unity Bill did put in place.
Yeah, I did see
so
that.
I don't like that. I think things like testing requirements are great. I don't like that the Unity Bill is forcing, from a city standpoint, from a local elected representative standpoint, I don't like that the cities are being forced by the state to do all the oversight, inspections, all that stuff yearly, which we don't normally have to do for most any business entities. And so the cities are having to now charge a fee, a permit fee and licensure, all this stuff. So now, not only are we having to pay
a certificate of compliance or something?
You got to get it from the city first, and then the state will give you. Well, the city, because the city's having to do all these things and do all this research, and so the cities are having to do fees and licensure fees. So now, as a business, we're having to pay the state and the city.
Yeah.
And we're basically paying the state so the state can tell the city to go ahead and do all the work. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's frustrating. And it looks from the street, it may look like dispensaries and all these businesses are just, booming. Money's just pouring in. It's piling up. And I would just, in our experience, that's just not really the case. A lot of that money is going right back out. The overhead is very high. Nothing is tax deductible. And the product is not cheap. And as a store policy, we have required testing since the very beginning, since day one of us selling product. But the Unity Bill now requires it. Since we've always required it, it's not going to be a shock to us. Our prices have already reflected the fact that we won't buy product for anybody that doesn't have testing. I don't think that's the case for a lot of places, though.
Sure.
So now you're going to have to buy stuff that's tested. It's going to cost more. And I don't know that everybody has accounted for that. And, when the tax bill is due at the end of the year, I think there's going to be a lot of shock for some people, too, about how much they're not able to deduct and so on and on.
That is a big question.
Not
just on the tax deduction, but how much can these places survive? Is it a bubble? Is it not? Nobody knows. And that's kind of what I'm asking.
Good things about it. We think a lot of that stuff is needed, but
that's just from the business side. I know there was one about the sharing of patients' information. That was my main.
Yes, absolutely.
Main, personally, which I just saw was just stopped because a legislator said so.
Right, and that's.
I thought there was an injunction put in place, but it's just just hold off.
I think
because some guy says it.
That is complicated. Well, this has all been complicated.
Yeah,
and even our city legal staff, which has several people in it, has had a really difficult time getting clarity on issues from the OMA on what the Unity Bill means and doesn't mean, what we're supposed to do. It's all just new to everybody. What do we charge for these fees?
Yeah.
What does inspection cost? I don't even know. We do know now, but that's stuff that's all had to be figured out. And, I think one thing to remember is, this law was created by the people, and, elected officials often, they're elected and they feel like it's their job to make those decisions and laws.
That's why they were sent there.
Right. And so, as soon as it passed, we all knew, well, these guys want to get their hands on it and change it and all that stuff. And, people shouldn't be surprised that, the people up there that are being tasked with implementing this are people that have spent their whole career opposed to it.
Yeah.
And now they're being forced to accept it. You know,
So
so until we elect people that have been friendly to it, always been friendly to it, it's always going to be a question. So when the legislature comes back in January, what's going to be the next thing they pass to restrict it or change it or whatever? You know, and then they're going to have to sue and, you know, whatever. They're going to try and add churches in or whatever the thing is. Or make it so that cannabis businesses can't advertise anymore. Like, that's one thing I've been hearing about. No billboards, no newspapers, no magazines, which is ridiculous. You don't do that for any other business.
Yeah.
You know, and all you free market conservative elected officials out there wanting to regulate the free market and tell people what they can do, you know, it's ridiculous. And so
it's kind of like with your case, you know, like they wanted to kind of keep it down.
Yeah.
They wanted to, you know, get your element out of here. We've been going like 3 hours.
Yeah,
so it's like
it's a long story.
It is, but
so many
just to wrap it up, like, do you think like it would have been easier for you before the trial if, like, I don't know how to say it, like media or news around here was actually not friendly to you, but actually covered it a little more, I guess, impartially? From your opinion?
Definitely.
I can think that and be like, oh yeah, they totally spun it. They hate this. That, you know.
So I would say the Norman transcript did a great job of covering it. I thought most of their stories were very accurate, and they I think may have been like the second most covered topic. I mean, not like OU football, but
sure,
second most covered topic, maybe outside of OU football, ever in the history of the paper.
Wow.
Like, they did more articles and covered that story more than anything they've ever covered. And just for so many reasons. But that, so I thought the transcript did a really good job. I felt others didn't. And, like, there were times when I, like specifically had, like, told the reporter, like, in email and in, like, on the audio, I'm not the owner of Friendly Market. Or there's no drugs involved. And they're like, there's no marijuana involved. Will you guys please print that there is no marijuana involved in this case? It's about pipes. And, like, still, they wouldn't do it. It's like drug charges, It's
just like technically you're right, I guess.
Yeah.
But
but the local paper was great about it. And partly one of the, you know, I knew one of the reporters pretty well. He's a musician at the Deli, actually, so he covered it a bunch of times. And so, that was fine. And then the national papers that covered it, you know, that is how the nonprofit heard about it, was they read about it in, I think, the Washington Post or New York Times. So, or from those sites, it linked into New York Norman transcript or something, I don't know, but that's how they heard about it. So, I mean, I think overall, you know, it was very helpful. The media was, I would say, much more positive to us than the prosecution really had no support. I mean, their support was their inner circle. That's it. I mean,
thankfully that wasn't enough.
Yeah, thankfully, and they were shocked. They
really?
couldn't believe it.
Well, how was the reaction in the courtroom? Were they just silent, or? I mean,
oh yeah. I mean, they couldn't believe it. They thought, like faces. I said, they thought it was their exact words are overwhelming evidence. It's overwhelming. You have to convict them. You have to. So.
Apparently not.
Yeah. So they were shocked. They were stunned at the whole thing. And now here we are, you know,
doing well.
Oklahoma's the talk of the country when it comes to cannabis. And, we have 2 stores. We got the numbers the other day from the city staff, and there are 62 dispensaries in Norman, 89 growers, and 35 processors, which is the 4th most of every city in Oklahoma. Interestingly enough, even though Norman is considerably larger than Edmond in both population and land area, Edmond has 74 dispensaries, 120 growers, and 53 processors. So I guess that's where the investment may be happening. OKC has 400 dispensaries, 439 growers, and 233 processors. Tulsa has 227 dispensaries, 229 growers, and 101 processors. So after that, it drops off.
Even the small little town I'm from, Guyman has three dispensaries, which is just blows my mind.
Yeah, Ardmore has 27, Shawnee has 25, Yukon has 11, Duncan has 10. I mean, yeah. It's how things change so quickly.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine what the police think. I'd love to hear their thoughts, but I know several that.
Well, I've seen some. We're talking about Edmond. There was one in Logan County where they pulled somebody over. They were transporting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, a couple weeks go by, and it's their attorneys on the news, and you're going, "Oh yeah, they had to drop the charges."
Yeah. Yeah.
Why did they do that? Well, they looked at the law. Wasn't on their side.
Yeah. The district attorney in Cleveland County could have saved the taxpayers a whole lot of money and time.
Yeah.
If he would have just done that himself.
I mean, seriously,
once they take a stand, in a lot of cases, they can't go back.
Yeah.
They won't and they can't. And in our case, Greg Mashburn could not back out of it, I guess, once they made their stand. And again, they were confident. So they may have just been that arrogant.
Yeah.
That we know for a fact this is
slam dunk.
Yeah. And it's a pretty amazing being here. There's still a lot of work to do, though, because there's still so many people that are in jail for marijuana-related charges, not just in Oklahoma, but throughout the country. And there's still inequity in, business ownership in this. Like I said, there's people, elected officials even, who have spent their entire life opposed to this, who are now getting in on the business side and making money off of it. And again, from my standpoint, it's not a booming business. We're doing good. We're doing better than we were without it. And I'm glad it's here, and I'm glad we're able to help people. And the stories and the people I see come in, it's a vast majority senior citizens and disabled and veterans. I mean, if there were medical qualifying conditions, 95% of the people that come in the store would absolutely qualify for whatever it is.
Yeah.
And to see that is really rewarding every day.
It's a lot of people in the community.
It is.
I don't think people realize that, especially if you've never even touched that type of world.
Yeah. And we have a doctor. We have a doctor visit here every other Friday, and it's just about full every time. And it's older folks and veterans, and it's people that really need it. Oklahoma is one of the most unhealthy states in the country. We have one of the highest uninsured rates in the country. We have a high rate of mental illness. So many factors, a high poverty rate. All
on the
those
top
things.
Of all those lists, right?
And so medical marijuana is something that is relatively low cost compared to that, and high benefit. And a lot of people that were reluctant to try it when it was illegal are coming out now to really people like, I haven't since I was in college, in the 60s or way back, or I never have. 80, 90-year-old people coming in. And so seeing that is really wonderful. It's rewarding, but there's still a lot of work to do to make things more equitable and make it right, correct the damage that, not just our local community we've done with prohibition over the years, but just nationwide. We've damaged generations of lives. We've ruined millions of lives over prohibition. We've got to...
Still are.
Yeah, still are. So we got a long way to go. I'm excited, but we're here, though.
But better days are ahead, hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully. So I think it's a good place to end it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And thank you for coming on the podcast. If you ever actually want to be on and not talk about your case.
Sure, anytime.
Which would be probably way more fun, I guess, in a sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm, like I said, now I'm in my fourth term on the city council. I'm the vice mayor of Norman now. I'm the longest serving member of the council. Not ever, but currently.
Yeah,
and,
sure.
So, and
there's plenty of issues.
Yeah. So, and things will continue to grow here, I think, and will continue to be interesting in the cannabis world. And anytime, any issue I'm willing to talk about. So,
awesome.
Let me know.
Well, thank you, sir.